Chapter 11-12. Ignore her for now. Let's see if we can find the person Jintai mentioned. That person might be an old acquaintance of Wei Chuanqiu's. Yu Qianqiu's gaze searched around, thinking of where to look. Wei Chuanqiu knows him? Deming Luan was a little surprised. He didn't know when Wei Chuanqiu knew such a powerful person. He had never heard of him. He looked around in disbelief. This ancient forest is so vast. Do we really have to search one area at a time? Search one area at a time? Yu Qianqiu shook his head. I'm afraid we won't be able to find that person even if we search the entire ancient forest. I heard Wei Chuanqiu say that the person's residence seems to be in another world. Moreover, the entrance is erratic. It's not like the other two worlds that are fixed in one place after the passage opens. It's very mysterious, so we have to rely on luck to find that person. Otherwise, Jintai wouldn't have used such a stupid method to find that person. He suddenly turned his head to look at Deming Luan and smiled. Actually, we're just looking. Do we really have to risk our lives to help Jintai? If we run into him, we'll see. If we don't, then forget it. At least on the surface we can get by with Jintai. Don't you think so? He probably didn't realize that without the World Commerce Association subordinates in the immortal world as restraints, and after witnessing by Changchun's methods that were not inferior to the other experts at Jintai's wedding, his mentality had gradually changed. Although he didn't mean it, his tone when speaking to Deming Luan was no longer as respectful as when speaking to the commander of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. To be more precise, there was no need to act like a grandson in front of Deming Luan. And the great bright wheel had accompanied him step by step, and he had subconsciously become a little unconcerned. Yu Qianqiu's mysterious means of sending Wei Chuanqiu and a large group of people to the Divine Ruin Realm, as well as his relationship with the Underworld Emperor and the Underworld Saintess, had all shocked him. Now he realized that this lad was somewhat unfathomable. Most importantly, Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng had a close relationship with this kid. Adding to the fact that they had risked their lives to save him, Deming Luan's mentality had changed greatly. Once the two of them finished discussing, they headed into the depths of the forest together. Walking from the edge of the ancient forest to the depths of the vast forest, one would find that the distance between the trees was getting thinner and thinner, but the individual trees were getting bigger and bigger. Even a dozen people holding hands would not be able to encircle these trees. Some of these towering trees were even hundreds of feet tall, and some of them had a canopy that could cover a radius of several miles, or even dozens of miles. The trunks of these trees were as sturdy and majestic as a city. It was hard to imagine how many years of snow, rain, wind, and frost they had experienced to grow to such a size. The magnificent trees attracted Yu Qianqiu from time to climb up to the crown of the trees. Standing on the branches, he looked around at the undulating green ocean. He realized that the scenery was even more spectacular and shocking than when he was flying in the sky. A gust of wind blew past, bringing with it a refreshing air. Amidst the rippling blue waves in front of him, there were also many beautiful purples and beautiful reds. There were all kinds of trees with leaves that were not green. A flock of white-feathered birds circled above the sea of trees for a while, then landed on the crown of the trees like blooming magnolia. One could even see light apes with their arms spread out, eagle cries circling in the sky, and tiger roars and ape cries below. It was a natural scene that fascinated people. Deming Luan, who was standing on the crown of the tree, looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. He did not know why he looked so infatuated. Deming Luan had not experienced the destruction of nature in the industrial era of Yu Qianqiu's previous life. As an immortal with profound cultivation in this era, he could not understand the worship of nature of the people of that era. In the future, if it is possible, I would like to build a hut in this vast sea of trees and no longer care about the gratitude and grudges of this world. Standing on the crown of the tree, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the green ocean in all directions. Deming Luan did not know why he was sighing. Chu Qingji's eyes slightly muttered to himself, "Where there are people, there are grudges. Once you step in, it is very difficult to leave. You do not want to provoke others, but there will always be people who cannot forget about you. If you want to live in seclusion, you must have enough strength. Otherwise, how can your former enemies let you go?" How could he not know this principle? Yu Qianqiu casually plucked a leaf from the branch beside him and placed it in his mouth. After chewing for a while, the juice of the leaf was stuck in his mouth and a bitter taste spread on his tongue. After forcefully swallowing it, he could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Just think about that senior Mu that Wei Chuanqiu spoke of. If he did not have profound strength, how could he live in seclusion here for so many years without anyone daring to disturb him? The two of them jumped down from the crown of the tree and continued to search. Along the way they discovered that on the dark ground covered by the towering trees, this land that never saw the light of day all year round began to reveal a wonder of life that was completely different from the outside world, all kinds of glowing plants. The deeper they went, the more glowing plants there were. Gradually, large groups of glowing plants appeared in their field of vision. Glowing moss, glowing mushrooms, all kinds of ferns and fungus plants displayed a dazzling array of colors. There were also all kinds of vines that were like weeping willows that emitted a natural and gentle glow. Xianxia marveled at the wonders of nature. He could not help but fall into a group of lavender-like plants that emitted a gentle purple light. This immediately startled the small animals that were lurking in or around it. Butterflies spread their glowing palm-sized wings and fluttered. Beetles with star-like spots of light on their shells hurriedly fluttered their wings and flew away. Just as they landed and climbed onto a tree trunk not far away, they saw a parrot-like bird with blue feathers on its head scuttling out from the branches and leaves of the tree trunk. It quickly hunted the beetles and then chased after the beetles that were flying around. A group of porcupine-like little fellows with a cluster of bluish-white glowing thorns on their backs quickly escaped from under Xianxia's feet. A fierce female porcupine, in order to protect her cubs, bent the thorns on her back and took the initiative to attack Xianxia. As a result, she was kicked away by Xianxia, who did not have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. She rolled a few times not far away and quickly ran away with the group of cubs while screaming. A few ghost-like black panthers crawled out of the natural cave formed by the roots of the tree. They stared at Xianxia with their green eyes and let out a low growl. They seemed to be ready to attack. Xianxia ignored them. Instead, he raised his head and looked up at the tree. He saw a huge python in a colorful camouflage aiming at the black panthers below. It silently slid down the tree trunk and approached them. The black panthers seemed to have noticed something from Xianxia's actions. A black panther that seemed to be the leader raised its head and looked up at the tree. It immediately let out a frightened roar to warn the others. Several black panthers quickly fled. When the huge python saw that its prey had escaped, it raised its head and hissed angrily at Xianxia. It suddenly shot over like an arrow leaving the bow. Xianxia snorted coldly. The purple flame high-energy saber that was protecting his side immediately shot out a few streaks. In an instant, the huge python was torn into hundreds of pieces in midair. It fell to the ground in a rain of blood. The gorgeous and enchanting colors were immediately mixed with the smell of blood. It immediately caused the air to throb faintly. It seemed to have triggered something. It immediately made the great Ming Luan, who was standing in the sea of flowers and on the tree trunk not far away, become vigilant. Suddenly the ground made two soft sounds. Xianxia felt his legs tighten. He saw two tree roots that were as thick as an arm bursting out from the ground and wrapping around his legs. The roots quickly extended upwards and pierced towards Xianxia's chest like a sharp spear. Xianxia quickly grabbed it with both of his hands. He looked around and said, "What evildoer?" Before he could finish his sentence, the ground made a series of popping sounds. Hundreds of tree roots pierced towards him like spears. Xianxia shouted sternly, "You're courting death." His whole body exploded with a purple light that was condensed from a high temperature. Wherever the purple light flashed, all the plants turned into ashes. The tree roots that had shot out were instantly destroyed. A muffled groan was heard from the forest. The great Ming Luan, who was standing on the tree trunk, stared at a big tree in front of him like an eagle. He waved his sleeves and a dozen bright moon-like light discs quickly shot out. With a series of so-so sounds, the dozens of light discs instantly destroyed the ancient tree in front of him. Audacious human. The remaining half of the big tree let out a strange cry. With a hong sound, it sunk into the ground. The dozens of light discs immediately chased after the deep pit that had appeared on the ground with a so-so sound. With a series of rumbling sounds, the light discs burst out from the ground and burrowed back into the great Ming Luan's sleeves. The originally serene atmosphere in the surroundings immediately became treacherous. It's a tree demon. Its ability to burrow underground is not bad. It runs really fast. The great Ming Luan snorted and looked around. He then frowned and said, "I'm afraid we've gotten into trouble. It's not good to stay here for long. It's better to leave as soon as possible. It's not that we're afraid of them. It's just that there are many plant demons in this ancient forest. It'll be very troublesome to get entangled with them." Just as Xianxia nodded his head, he heard a rumbling voice coming from all directions. "You want to leave?" Too late. The shadows of the trees in all directions danced in the wind. The surrounding ancient trees suddenly grew and covered the sky. In an instant they sealed off all directions. The great Ming Luan flashed to Xianxia's side. Both of them floated in the air. Countless tree roots emerged from the ground. In a short while, all the glowing plants on the ground were annihilated in the churning soil. The tree roots on the ground were entangled tightly. The light in the surroundings immediately disappeared. It was pitch black. The great Ming Luan looked around and snorted coldly, a group of things that don't know the immensity of the heaven and earth. If you don't move, don't blame me for killing you all. Suddenly, 8 balls of green light flashed out from the dense wall of trees. The sealed space was instantly filled with a dazzling green light. 8 green-robed old men walked out from the green light, each of them had an angry look on their faces. One of the old men, who was wearing a green leaf crown, stared at the great bright wheel and said indifferently, "So it's an early-stage immortal emperor cultivator, no wonder you dare to boast so shamelessly. Outsiders, even immortal emperors from the immortal world wouldn't dare to be too presumptuous here. How are you compared to immortal Emperor Jintai? Our ancient forest and your immortal palace have an agreement not to invade each other. Why are you killing here?" Chapter 11:13. From the looks of it, this person seemed to be the leader of these people. Ming Luan took a closer look and was slightly shocked. He realized that he could not see through the person's cultivation. He looked at the others and found that their cultivation was similar to his. It seemed that this was going to be troublesome. He immediately sent a telepathic message to Yu Qianzhou about the situation and discussed whether they should fight or run away. Yu Qianzhou was also stunned. He did not expect that he would attract so many experts just by making a move. It seemed that this ancient forest was located within the 3 realms but was independent of the 3 realms. There must be something extraordinary about it. It was obvious that there were more experts in the ancient forest. It would not be good for him to make a big deal out of this. Thinking of this, Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly and said, "You are exaggerating. A giant python ambushed me and I killed it. Then a tree demon attacked me first. I did not kill it because this is the ancient forest. If I really wanted to start a massacre, do you think it would have a chance to run?" As he spoke, there was a buzzing sound. His entire body was instantly enveloped by purple flames like firewood that had been ignited. An intense heat surged out. The green light that was flickering on the bodies of the 8 people instantly retracted and formed a protective aura on the surface of their bodies, resisting the frightening heat that made their hearts palpitate. All of them looked at Yu Qianzhou in shock and bewilderment. All of them felt a terrifying power that naturally countered each other, causing their hearts to tremble. The pupils of the old man wearing the green leaf crown suddenly shrank and he suddenly cried out, "This is purple fire, purple fire, purple fire of the true Samadhi fire." The other 7 people also cried out, "Purple fire?" Ming Luan felt the terrifying temperature around his body. He also looked at Yu Qianzhou in bewilderment. He didn't know how many more secrets this fellow had. The tangled roots on the ground and the surrounding tree walls were visibly shrinking with a squeaking sound. It seemed that they were in great pain. Yu Qianzhou only wanted to show off. He did not want to become enemies with them. He quickly retracted the terrifying heat and the purple fire into his body. He looked at them with a smile, indicating that he really did not have any evil intentions. Once the purple fire disappeared, the 8 of them finally stabilized their trembling souls. At this moment, they realized that they could not see through Yu Qianzhou's cultivation. The 8 of them looked at each other, and the green light on the surface of their bodies retracted back into their bodies. The entangled tree roots on the ground quickly separated and retracted back into the soil. The surrounding tree walls also quickly retracted, and the ancient trees returned to their original positions. The hazy light began to shine down from the sky again. However, the various kinds of light plants that were buried in the soil could not be restored. The scattered light of the plants could be seen in the soil after the tumble. Of the light of the ground of the earth was much darker than before. I admit that your purple fire can restrain us. However, this is not a place for you to behave atrociously. The old man wearing the green leaf crown stared at Yu Qianzhou and said in a deep voice, "Since nothing serious happened, we do not want to make things difficult for you. We hope that you will abide by the agreement between us and the immortal palace. Please leave quickly." Ming Luan immediately snorted. Previously they were not so easy to talk to. It was obvious that they were here to punish us. Now that they realized that something was wrong, they immediately became easy to talk to. Yu Qianzhou glanced at him. He knew what that humph meant. However, although the purple fire was powerful, if he used it with his own cultivation he would not be able to gain the upper hand if he really fought with these experts. The main reason was that the difference between their cultivation was too big. Moreover, he did not want to become enemies with the people in the ancient forest. Leave quickly? Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows. He shook his head and said with a smile, "I am afraid that I will have to disappoint you. This time I was invited to the Woodkiller Sea as a guest. I have not met Senior Mu yet. How can I leave so easily?" Woodkiller Sea. A few people frowned and muttered. It seemed that it was the first time they had heard of this. As for Senior Mu, there were simply too many people in the ancient forest who could be called Senior Mu. The 8 of them were no exception. It was also the first time that Deming Luan had heard of this place. However, he believed that Yu Qianqiu did not say it casually. There must be a reason for him to say it at this time. As he pondered, he felt that this Yu Qianqiu was a bit mysterious. In fact, Yu Qianqiu didn't know about the Woodkiller Sea. He had only heard Wei Chuanqiu mention it once, so he casually used it. In any case, he never had any psychological burden when he spoke carelessly. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept across the 8 people. From the eyes of the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown, he caught a trace of surprise and uncertainty. He immediately smiled at him and said, "Presumably you should know about the Woodkiller Sea." The other 7 people's gazes immediately focused on him. They all revealed a questioning look. One of them even asked, "You really know?" The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown hesitated for a while. He muttered, "In the past, when I traveled the entire ancient forest, I vaguely heard people mention that the Woodkiller Sea seemed to be the name of the ancient forest's holy land. The person who said this also heard it but did not dare to confirm it. I did not expect to hear this place mentioned again today. I almost forgot about this name." Damn. Jintai was right. Even the old man who lived here for a long time did not know about it. Yu Qianqiu was a little disappointed. However, he heard the 7 people say in unison, "Holy Land." It seemed like they had never heard of the Woodkiller Sea before. Holy Land. Yu Qianqiu's spirit was lifted. He looked left and right and said with a mouth full of nonsense, "Yes. That's right. The Woodkiller Sea is the holy land of the ancient forest. Do you know where it is?" Everyone's gazes immediately focused on him. Although the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown was somewhat mentally prepared, he still could not help but say in surprise, "The Senior Mu you are talking about is the Senior Mu from the Holy Land?" Yu Qianqiu was immediately filled with joy. Finally, he had a chance to find the place where the wood spirit lived. Although he could not devour it now, he could first find the place and mark it. Who knows, it might be useful in the future. He immediately nodded and said, "Yes. Yes. It is the Senior Mu from your Holy Land." Although he was not sure, he was most likely right. "You were invited by the Senior Mu from the Holy Land?" The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown asked in disbelief. Yes. I was invited by him." Yu Qianqiu nodded sincerely. Deming Luan looked at him suspiciously. The old man was not an idiot. After the initial shock, he realized that something was wrong. He also asked suspiciously, "Since Senior Mu invited you to the Holy Land as a guest, how could you not find the Holy Land?" Yu Qianqiu spread his hands without hesitation and said with a bitter smile, "Senior Mu's cultivation is profound and I view him as a god. He said he would let me visit the ancient forest's holy land, the Woodkiller Sea, as a guest. I naturally agreed on the spot and I was a man of my word. But I did not know that the Holy Land, the Woodkiller Sea, was so hard to find. After searching for a few days, I did not even see Senior Mu's shadow. If you guys know where the Holy Land is, why don't you bring me there? I will reward you handsomely." He said it as if it was the truth. Was he for real? Deming Luan suppressed the suspicion in his eyes. He was afraid that others would misunderstand. "You have seen Senior Mu from the Holy Land?" An old man said enviously. The others were also envious. It was as if meeting Senior Mu was such a lucky thing. The old man wearing a wooden crown was envious, but he shook his head regretfully. "Senior Mu is mysterious. There are only legends about him in the ancient forest. The number of people who have seen him can be counted on one's fingers. Even if they have seen him, it is a taboo. Very few people would talk about Senior Mu, so I do not know who has seen him. The gate to the Holy Land is even more elusive. Without a certain amount of luck, it is impossible to enter. Legend has it that if we wood cultivators are lucky enough to enter the Holy Land, we will receive guidance from Senior Mu. It is very beneficial to our cultivation. Unfortunately, we do not have the fortune to go to the Holy Land." The others heard this and had a look of yearning. Only Yu Qianqiu observed their expressions and said with disappointment, "So, you guys do not know where the Holy Land is?" "Indeed we do not know." The old man wearing a wooden crown shook his head. He suddenly paused and said, "But since you were invited by Senior Mu, perhaps you can try your luck at the ancient language tree. Maybe you will encounter the gate to the Holy Land." "Ancient language tree?" Where is it? Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. The old man waved his hand and pointed to the east. In the center of the ancient forest there is a cliff. Beside the waterfall, there is a towering tree called the ancient language tree. Its leaves are yellow and withered. It is said that it has died for countless years. But it has not died for countless years. It has experienced countless snow, rain, wind, and frost, but its withered leaves have not fallen. It is very magical. The most amazing thing is that whenever the wind blows, you can hear a strange murmur under the tree. It is as if someone is talking. This is also the origin of the name, ancient language tree. Unfortunately, very few people can understand what it is saying. It is said that those who can understand it can find the gate to the Holy Land. You guys should go and try. Are there many people in the ancient forest? It must be a gathering of experts. Will it be inconvenient for people from the outside world to go there? Yu Qianzhou asked in detail. He was worried that trespassing into the forbidden area would cause the experts in the ancient forest to gang up on him. The old man paused and immediately understood his concern. He sighed and said, I heard that it used to be lively there. But too many people wasted their time under the ancient language tree, but they could not understand what it said. Almost all of them returned in disappointment. Plus, it is inconvenient for us wood elementalists to leave our bodies for too long. As time goes by, except for some newcomers, no one else will go there. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou's expression twitched and he cursed in his heart. He felt that the old man's guidance was too unreliable. He didn't even need to guess to know that it was only a legend. If it was useful, then the wood demon sea, which regarded it as a holy land, would probably swarm there every day. Chapter 11:14. The old man seemed to know that this matter was not very reliable and was afraid of making the other party unhappy. He smiled awkwardly and said, I was just saying. Sire, please do as you wish. If there is nothing else, we will take our leave. Take care. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand to stop. He stared at the old man and slowly asked, The ancient forest is so big. How am I going to find the center? Deming Luan looked at him speechlessly. It seemed like this guy really wanted to do something useless. The old man was very honest. He waved his hand again and pointed to the east. He said with a serious expression, Go straight to the east. When you see a cliff with a waterfall and a lonely ancient tree, you will reach the center of the ancient forest. The environment there is very obvious and easy to find. You will see it when you get there. Then he kindly warned, If Sire really wants to go there, I suggest you go straight to the sky. You can more or less avoid some unnecessary trouble. You must know that not everyone in this ancient forest is kind. That is all I have to say. I will take my leave. The other 7 people also followed him and cupped their hands. The soil on the ground surged like a fountain and swallowed the 8 of them. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. Did you really receive an invitation to the wood-killing sea? Deming Luan suddenly turned around and asked. Yu Qianzhou looked around and laughed. He did not answer the question. Since it is like this, I will just treat it as an eye-opener. Let's go. A figure rushed into the sky and broke through the shade. Deming Luan shook his head and followed closely behind. Looking down from the sky, the ancient forest was still endless. The mountains were undulating and the waves were like the sea. It looked spectacular, but it was unknown how many dangers were hidden within. After flying at high speed for 3 days, the 2 of them who were constantly looking around suddenly slowed down and slowly stopped in the air. In front of the 2 of them was a red cliff. The cliff was exposed and the rocks were red. It was almost barren. It was very conspicuous in this vast ancient forest. A river meandered out of the forest and crossed the cliff. When it reached the end of the cliff, it was covered by the canopy of a towering golden tree. It was as if all the river water had gathered under the tree. The sound of water splashing could be heard faintly. It should be here. Deming Luan pointed below and said, Yes, that ancient tree should be the ancient language tree. Let's go. Let's go down and take a look. Yu Qianzhou was the first to go down. He was stunned when he landed under the tree. The Deming Luan who followed was also stunned. There were 2 people who had arrived before them. One was wearing a golden robe while the other was wearing a white robe and was barefoot. The 2 were looking back. These 2 people were none other than Jin Tai and Bai Qi. It was unknown when they had met here, but since Yu Qianzhou and the Great Bright Wheel could find this place, it was naturally not strange for them to find this place as well. Yu Qianzhou didn't move from his spot, but the Great Bright Wheel flashed over and greeted the 2. Greetings, Immortal Emperor, greetings, Underworld King. Bai Qi's gaze fell from Yu Qianzhou to the Deming Luan. He smiled faintly and said, It seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place. He turned to Jin Tai and said, Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance? Bai Chi's gaze fell from Yu Qianqiu to the Deming Luan. He smiled faintly and said, it seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place. He turned to Jin Tai and said, Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance? Jin Tai turned around and looked at the vast green sea at the foot of the mountain. He pointed to both sides of the cliff and said, you search from this side, I'll search from that side. We'll flank both sides. He then pointed to the front and signaled to Deming Luan Yi, all of you search from the middle. This all of you, obviously included Yu Qianqiu. Bai Qi looked ahead and was silent for a while. He said slowly, what if we can't find it? Jin Tai said resolutely, then we will lure Wang Qing and the rest here and then set a few big fires to burn the ancient forest. I want to see how long old man Mu can hide. Bai Qi raised his eyebrows and suddenly looked at him and said, you mean, to kill with a borrowed knife? Lure Wang Qing and the rest here and then set fire to the ancient forest. Then push the blame to Wang Qing and the rest and let that old man Mu settle the score with them? That's what you said, I didn't say that. Jin Tai snorted coldly and turned into a stream of light and shot to the left. Bai Qi sneered and turned to smile at Yu Qianqiu. Then he also turned into a stream of light and shot to the right. Two rays of light, one gold and one white, flew along the cliff and disappeared into the dense forest in the distance in the blink of an eye. This red bare cliff was like a plain. No one knew how the river that was tens of meters wide was formed. Yu Qianqiu walked along the shore towards the great Ming wheel under the ancient tree. From time to time, fat fish jumped out of the water and fell back into the water. When he reached the edge of the steep cliff, he saw that the river suddenly turned into a crystal waterfall, and the sound of water flowing could be heard. Incomparably thick tree roots climbed up the cliff like countless pythons, and even stubbornly rooted into the red rocks. More than a dozen tree roots drilled out from the mountain wall in the waterfall, extending down the mountain wall along the waterfall. Strong and powerful tree roots could also be seen in the river on the cliff. The exposed roots of the ancient tree occupied an area of several hundred meters on the cliff. In fact, the entire tree was small compared to some of the towering trees in the ancient forest, but it was estimated to be at least 100 meters tall. The trunk would not be able to be encircled by less than 20 people. The branches were bronze in color and spread out in all directions, and were covered with golden leaves the size of a palm. It was like a golden canopy protecting the area. The red cliff was almost barren, there was a clear river, and there was a yellow ancient tree. On the other side of the cliff was a green ancient forest, and there were blue sky and white clouds. The colors were so distinct that it made people feel like they were in an oil painting. Yu Qianqiu had taken out a flying sword at some point in time. He stood on the thick and exposed roots of the tree and forcefully hacked at the ancient tree a few times. Unexpectedly, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. After spending a lot of effort to chop off a piece of rough bark, he turned around and shouted to Deming Luan, it's really a withered tree but it's really hard. No wonder it can stand here for so long. After saying that, he directly sat on the thick roots and rested with his back against the big tree. Deming Luan was speechless. He walked towards him and asked, what do we do now? Do you really want to try your luck here? There's no smoke without fire. With this legend there must be some truth to it. Since I'm here I'll just take things as they come. If I don't try, how will I know if it's true or not? Yu Qianqiu laughed and lay there with his hands on his head. Deming Luan, who was originally worried about the future of the immortal palace after it collapsed, was also infected by his emotions. Thinking that this guy had a backup plan, there was indeed nothing to worry about. After thinking it through, he unloaded the psychological burden and relaxed his body. He walked with large strides to the side of Yu Qianqiu and laid down leisurely like him. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to look at him and smiled, that's right. Being relaxed is the way of the king. It's so tiring to keep a straight face all day long. Deming Luan was just about to open his mouth to say something when suddenly a gust of wind blew. The golden leaves above swayed, and the whole ancient tree actually let out a faint murmur under the wind. When the wind was strong, the murmur became louder. When the wind was light, it sounded like a gentle lullaby. The two guys lying on the roots immediately widened their eyes and listened attentively, hoping to hear something. However, after listening for a long time, they still couldn't hear anything. The wind stopped and the sound also stopped. Yu Qianqiu stared at the slightly swaying leaves above him and said, did you hear anything? This is clearly the sound of the wind blowing through this tree. It would be strange if I could hear anything. Deming Luan coldly snorted, it's really just a rumor. Do you really want to continue waiting? Don't jump to conclusions so easily. Why don't we wait for a day and see? If there are no abnormal changes tomorrow, it won't be too late to leave. Just as Yu Qianzhou finished speaking, another gust of wind blew, and the ancient tree started to murmur again. The two people's ears perked up again. There were so many winds in the mountain. Every once in a while they would hear the ancient tree humming a lullaby. This made Yu Qianzhou feel a little drowsy. Suddenly there was a pa-pa sound in the river. A fish jumped out of the water and fell back. Yu Qianzhou suddenly sat up and wiped his face with both hands. He felt that it was too dangerous to fall asleep in a place like this. When he turned around, De Ming Luan had already sat up and was looking at him with a cold smile. It seemed to be saying, "You can even fall asleep here, I really have to give it to you." Yu Qianzhou smiled awkwardly and said, "I'll go get something to relieve my fatigue." Then he dashed towards the bottom of the cliff far away. De Ming Luan was curious about what this fellow was going to do. After a while, he saw him scurrying back from the bottom of the cliff with a big pile of firewood in his hands. He threw it on the ground and then took out two swords and ran to the river bank to look around. Suddenly, two water pillars shot out from the water and wrapped around two fat carps. They dashed towards the swords in Yu Qianzhou's hands and opened their mouths to swallow the swords in their hands. Yu Qianzhou carried the two big carps and ran back to the pile of firewood. He took out a set of barbecue utensils. The firewood on the ground was quickly chopped into pieces and stuffed into the barbecue utensils. With a wave of his hand, a ball of red flame was spat out and the firewood in the barbecue utensils turned into bright red charcoal. The two fat carps were still twisting their bodies even though they were dead. They were then grilled over the charcoal. After doing all these, Yu Qianzhou rubbed his hands excitedly and took out 2 jars of wine. He threw one of them to De Ming Luan, who was stunned. He then opened the seal and gulped down a few mouthfuls before putting it aside. He took out some seasoning and brushed it on the dead carps. He was beautiful, but when combined with the environment at this moment and place, he really ruined the scenery. De Ming Luan was really speechless. He could only sigh as he leaned against the tree and drank by himself. When the aroma of the barbecue was wafting in the air, he suddenly heard Yu Qianzhou's, "Eh?" De Ming Luan turned around and saw Yu Qianzhou standing there curiously and said, "This aroma? Don't tell me the barbecue in the ancient forest also has this aroma?" He held his sword with both hands and raised it in front of his face. He fanned his nostrils and sniffed the barbecue in his hand. Chapter 11:15. What's wrong? Great Bright Will asked indifferently. He suddenly realized that this fellow's words and actions seemed to be incompatible with this world. Why would the roasted fish have the fragrance from Luer's body? It doesn't seem to be from the roasted fish. Yu Qianzhou muttered. His face popped out from behind the 2 big roasted fish and said, "Do you smell something?" "Nonsense. Of course it's the smell of the roasted fish." Great Bright Will said in a bad mood. "That's not right. Could it be?" Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up and he immediately looked around. De Ming Luan's pupils that were looking at him suddenly shrank. He saw that the place where Yu Qianzhou was standing suddenly had a layer of transparent black ripple light wall. If it wasn't for the clear and crystalline light, it would be almost impossible to notice. And Yu Qianzhou, who was inside it, was looking around like a thief, as if he had stolen 2 grilled fish from someone. "Be careful behind you." Great Bright Will cried out in alarm. Yu Qianzhou was shocked when he heard this. He suddenly turned around and his entire body suddenly disappeared. Great Bright Will shot out rapidly and a series of light wheels shot out from his sleeves, shooting towards the wall of light with the force of lightning. However, the exploding light wheels missed. That wall of light seemed to have disappeared at the same time as Yu Qianzhou. The great bright wheel that flashed away searched around the roasted fish. The 10 light wheels that were retracted circled around his body to protect him as if he was facing a great enemy. After that, Great Bright Will flew into the sky and quickly patrolled the surroundings. Unfortunately, he couldn't find a trace of Yu Qianzhou in all directions. When he returned to the side of the barbecue set, the Great Bright Will kicked the barbecue set into the river dozens of meters away with a clang sound. He looked around his surroundings silently, thinking about what had happened just now. Normally, it was impossible for Yu Qianzhou to leave without saying a word. Furthermore, the situation just now. The great bright wheel was suddenly slightly stunned. Could it be that the mysterious rippling light wall just now was the so-called gate of the sacred land? The more he pondered, the more he felt that it was the case. A gust of wind blew by, and the ancient whisperer tree repeated the same ancient voice that it had been murmuring for countless years. De Ming Luan looked at the ancient whisperer tree, and after a moment of absent-mindedness, he shook his head and said to himself with a bitter smile, "Is this kid really that lucky? People couldn't find the door to the Holy Land, but he was roasting fish here and he accidentally entered it? Grilled fish? Unless, otherwise how could there be such a coincidence? The great bright will seemed to have thought of something, and hurriedly flashed to the riverside. He picked up the severely deformed barbecue set from the kick, and used his great cultivation to roughly repair it with a ka-ka sound. Carrying the barbecue set, he carefully examined the position that Xianxia had placed it earlier, and restored it to its original position. Then he tossed the remaining dry firewood on the ground into the barbecue set, and quickly started a fire. This wasn't the end. He also took out 2 flying swords and with a shwa-shwa sound he stabbed 2 fat carps into the riverside. After everything was ready, he imitated Xianxia's previous actions, and also pretended to roast the fish. However, he seemed to be a little absent-minded, and would occasionally look behind him. Speaking of which, when Xianxia heard the great bright wheel's warning, he abruptly turned around to be on guard. Before he could figure out what was going on, he felt as if he had collided with someone. His head also made a dong sound as if he had been hit by something with a stick. In the end, before he could even cry out in pain, a soft and pleasant ouch came from the other side. Xianxia was instantly enraged. He hit someone and still cried out in pain. This was too much of a bully. Xianxia focused his eyes and saw a green-clothed little girl staggering back from the collision. When he saw who it was, he couldn't help but be stunned. The green-clothed little girl rubbing her nose also froze when she saw who it was. Lu'er. Xianxia said in disbelief. If the little girl in front of him wasn't Lu'er, who he had saved and brought back to the World Merchant Association, then who else could it be? He saw Lu'er carrying a large brown wooden staff. The staff seemed to be made from 2 intertwined tree roots, and the head of the staff was like a large lingji mushroom. It seemed to be very out of place in Lu'er's hands. Xianxia? Lu'er was also stunned. If the person in front of her wasn't Xianxia, then who else could it be? It was just that his expression was somewhat fierce, and he was carrying 2 swords in his hands, as if he wanted to eat someone who had offended him. But the strange thing was that there were 2 fragrant dead and deformed fish stuck in the 2 swords. He didn't know what he was doing. Xianxia's dull gaze suddenly moved left and right, attracted by the surrounding greenery. In the distance there was a thin mist and the forest was like splashed ink. The mountains were secluded, and the refreshing air was filled with the fragrance of flowers and plants. It was as quiet as a painting, as if he had fallen into a dream. The little girl carrying an uncoordinated staff in front of him was a bit of a wet blanket. Where is this place? Xianxia had 2 grilled fish stuck in his hands, and he quickly turned around to look at his surroundings. He realized that in the moment he turned around, the scenery had suddenly changed. Right now he was standing on a hillside that wasn't considered high. His gaze fell upon an ancient tree behind him, and he was once again dumbfounded. The golden leaves and the bronze trunk were exactly the same as the ancient tree he had seen on the cliff earlier. The only difference was that the ancient language tree from before was entrenched on a red stone cliff, while this one was entrenched on a mountain peak. Looking into the distance, it wasn't quite possible to say that it was the same tree, but it was too similar to say that it wasn't the same tree. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew and the golden leaves rustled. The familiar murmuring was like a lullaby, reverberating in his ears again. However, the surrounding scenery had completely changed, and there wasn't the slightest similarity. Xianxia looked at the ancient tree in a daze. Ancient language tree. Xianxia, how did you come in? Lu'er, who was carrying a large staff, also asked in a daze. Lu'er, what is this place? Xianxia suddenly turned around and asked. Lu'er, who was carrying a large staff, was stunned and said, This is Would Killer See. Would Killer See? Xianxia's head quickly swayed left and right and looked around again. He said in disbelief, This is Would Killer See? How is this possible? I was grilling fish just fine, why did I suddenly come to Would Killer See? *CK. This is too illogical. Could it be this? His gaze stared at the ancient language tree with golden leaves. What is this? Lu'er, who was already confused, was even more confused. Suddenly she cried out in shock, Not good. Not good. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to leave. What's wrong? Hearing her say it so seriously, even Xianxia was shocked. Lu'er carried the brown wooden staff with both hands and activated it with a secret technique. The large staff head immediately brewed a ball of green light. As Lu'er waved the staff, a beam of green light shot towards the ancient language tree like a laser. The trunk of the ancient language tree immediately rippled with green light, and gradually emitted a black splendor. A sullen cold snort sounded, and a green-robed old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion suddenly appeared. With a wave of his hand, he cut off the green light that shot out from the head of the huge staff. His palm made a grabbing motion, and the big-headed staff in Luer's hand was immediately sucked over and caught in his hand. Luer cried out in shock and quickly flashed behind Xianxia. Xianxia immediately protected her and angrily shouted as if he was facing a great enemy, "Who is it? You're already so old, yet you still want to snatch a little girl's things. Don't you have any shame?" The roasted fish on the two swords in his hands still had a lingering fragrance. The green-robed old man looked at him calmly, and the wooden staff in his hand stood upright on the ground. He said indifferently, "So it's you? Luer, come out. He was brought in by you?" Xianxia was slightly stunned. Hearing the meaning behind these words, the other party seemed to know him, but he didn't seem to have any impression of him. Luer, who was behind him, moved half her body out submissively, and one hand grabbed onto the clothes on the back of Xianxia. She looked at the old man and weakly called out, "Grandpa!" Xianxia suddenly turned around and struggled free from the small hand that was grabbing onto his clothes. He looked at Luer and said, "He's your grandpa? Isn't the old man selling snacks in hallucinatory Immortal City your grandpa? How many grandpas do you have?" Luer secretly glanced at the old man and said in a low voice, "Of course there's only one grandpa. The one you saw last time was Grandpa's transformation." Upon hearing this, Xianxia was shocked and sized up the old man again. He thought to himself, no wonder even Jin Tai wanted to find him for help. As expected, he was a very capable person. Whether it was tall or short, fat or thin, his spirit was completely different from that old man last time. This wasn't as simple as a disguise, but a transformation. Supernatural power. "So you're Senior Mu?" Xianxia hurriedly bowed and said, "Xianxia was impolite just now. I didn't know that you were senior, please forgive me." Old man Mu didn't care about him at all. He stared at Luer and shouted again, "He was brought in by you?" Luer pouted aggrievedly and said, "No. I also don't know how he came in, he suddenly appeared." With his understanding of the little girl, old man Mu could tell that she wasn't lying. He then stared at Xianxia and said in a deep voice, "Speak. How on earth did you come in? If there's a single lie, I'll beat you to death immediately." Xianxia flashed the grilled fish on the two swords and said with a wry smile, "Whether Senior believes it or not, I don't know how I came in either. I was clearly grilling fish under the ancient language tree in the ancient forest. Who knew that I would turn around and inexplicably appear here? Even if you ask me to explain, I can't explain what's going on either." Grilling fish under the ancient language tree? Old man Mu's tone was filled with disbelief. He turned around and pointed his cane at the ancient language tree. Immediately, a green window appeared on the ancient language tree. Like a TV screen, the scene that Xianxia had seen on the cliff in the ancient forest appeared. Old man Mu waved his cane and the scene slowly rotated. In the end, it was fixed at an angle. The green window showed the scene of the great bright wheel grilling fish with two swords. That guy didn't mind grilling fish, but he kept looking around vigilantly from time to time. His eyes clearly met with the three people here, but he continued to look around vigilantly as if he hadn't seen anything. Judging from the angle from which the window was looking at the great bright wheel, Xianxia estimated that the place where the great bright wheel was observing the ancient language tree on the cliff. He didn't expect that the ancient language tree could also monitor the outside world. It was really amazing. Chapter 11:16. Before he could think further, old man Mu waved his cane and the green window disappeared. He reluctantly believed that Xianxia had been roasting fish outside, but this did not mean that he believed everything. He turned around and stared at Xianxia with his deep eyes. "You went to the ancient language tree in the ancient forest to roast fish? If you can't give me a reasonable explanation, although I am not a bloodthirsty person, I will not be lenient to those with ulterior motives." Xianxia secretly communicated with Utopia, and when he noticed that it was unobstructed, he immediately had the confidence to protect himself. He immediately said bluntly, "To tell you the truth, I came to look for you." "Look for me?" Old man Mu was slightly stunned and then snorted. "Did that little bat ask you to come?" "Little bat?" Xianxia was stunned and then realized that he was talking about Wei Chuanxiu. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Senior, you misunderstood me. I didn't want to take the risk here, but I couldn't disobey Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's orders, so I had to bite the bullet and come here. I never thought that I would really meet you, but who knew that I would run into you? Jin Tai asked you to look for me?" Old man Mu also showed a hint of confusion on his face. He didn't ask me to come alone. The person who was roasting fish outside just now also asked me to come. There are a total of 11 people, including immortal Emperor Jintai and Emperor of the Netherworld Bai Qi. Everyone is scattered throughout the entire ancient forest to look for you, senior, Yu Qianzhou said respectfully. Jintai and Bai Qi are here too? Old Man Mu's eyes turned and he asked with some emotion, did something happen outside? Something big has happened. Yu Qianzhou sighed. From Jintai's wedding to Bai Changchun's appearance, to the sudden appearance of Wang Qing, the head of the Heartless Palace, to the sudden appearance of a new force and the defeat of the Immortal Palace, to the King of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng's attack on the Dark Imperial Palace, and finally Jintai's decision to ask Old Man Mu for help. So they fled here to find Old Man Mu. During this period, he and the Daming Wheel encountered that group of wood demons and learned about the legend of the ancient language tree. Then he told Yu Qianzhou roughly what had happened. This narration went on for more than an hour. Such a series of ups and downs made the inexperienced lurer's eyes light up. Her face was filled with hope, as if she wished she could be there to experience it. Although the outside world was dangerous, it had a fatal attraction to her. Although Old Man Mu had been suppressing her and wanted her to live an ordinary life, for a person like her who had never experienced the joys and sorrows of the world, how could she settle down if she could not calm down? How could she appreciate the value of ordinary life? Perhaps after she experienced the endless vicissitudes of life and understood that the past was unbearable, she would be willing to live an ordinary life like her grandfather. After a moment of silence, Old Man Mu sighed slightly and said, "It seems that it is time for the immortal realm and the netherworld to change dynasties again." Yu Qianzhou was shocked. Listening to these words, it seemed that the other party would not help Jintai turn over a new leaf. In fact, he also wanted this old guy to come out and help Jintai. After all, Jintai was in power and he still had room to develop slowly, but the Heartless Palace wanted to kill him. Now it seemed that the relationship between Jintai and this old guy was not solid. Jintai wanted to ask for Senior's help. "Are you going to leave him in the lurch?" Yu Qianzhou asked tentatively. "What do you mean by leave him in the lurch?" Old Man Mu slightly closed his eyes and shook his head, saying, "People don't distinguish between right and wrong. They fight for honor and disgrace. The honored will live in peace and the disgraced will be mediocre. He asked for everything. I have seen a lot of changes of dynasties. It is because I don't want to get involved that I live in seclusion here. What does Jintai's life and death have to do with me? How can I leave him in the lurch?" As he said this, he opened his eyes and said, "Do you really want to be a lobbyist for Jintai? As far as I know, all the sects in the immortal realm have a grudge against the Immortal Palace. As the sect leader of the World Chamber of Commerce, don't tell me that you are willing to submit to Jintai." Yu Qianzhou was speechless. The other party had already said this much. He knew that it was useless to say anything else. But then again he was just trying. If he could help Jintai turn over a new leaf, it would be a little good. If Jintai couldn't turn over a new leaf, it would be good too. That guy's character was really not flattering. The battle at the Immortal Palace had shown that even the lives of his trusted subordinates were worthless in his eyes. It made people feel too insecure. As the saying goes, when a wall is down, people push it. Yu Qianzhou was also not a good guy. After confirming that Old Man Mu would not help Jintai, in order to please Old Man Mu, he made up his mind to simply kill that inhumane pervert Jintai. After a moment of hesitation, Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands in obeisance and said, "Senior, after you took lure from the World Chamber of Commerce last time, Wei Chuanxiu reprimanded me and warned me that I must be respectful when I see you again. So there are some things that I dare not hide from you." Old Man Mu only had a high cultivation and extensive knowledge, but he was not omniscient. When he heard this irrelevant and groundless interjection, he could not help but be startled and said, "What do you want to say?" "It's like this, I inadvertently learned of a conspiracy of Jintai. If I can't find Senior for help or Senior is unwilling to help, Jintai is going to lure Wang Qing and the others from the Heartless Palace to the ancient forest, and then set the ancient forest on fire to push the blame to Wang Qing and the others. Jintai said that if he does this, Senior will definitely not let Wang Qing and the others go." Yu Qianzhou said with a respectful face, looking like he was snitching. "How dare he?" Old Man Mu's long beard and green robe instantly fluttered even though there was no wind. He snorted and said, "Even if you give him 10 guts, he still won't dare." Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He could see that this old man thought himself to be an expert and had probably never taken Jintai seriously. He did not know Jintai's character very well, so water had entered his brain. With Jintai's character, he would marry his wife with great fanfare when he was in power, but once he lost power, he would abandon his wife and subordinates and run for his life. Now that he had lost his wife, he did not even mention it. Just imagine if he was forced into a corner, what else would he not do? However, based on the understanding between the two parties, it was not appropriate for Yu Qianqiu to argue with him. He could only take it one step at a time and nodded repeatedly to flatter him. That's true. Unless Jin Tai is courting death, he would not dare to act recklessly. Old Man Mu indeed did not take Jin Tai seriously and quickly put aside the matter of Jin Tai. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Didn't little bat tell you not to see Lu again? Damn it. I have told you so many things, are you going to fall out with me so quickly?" Yu Qianqiu quickly contacted Utopia and made preparations to escape. Then he cupped his hands and smiled bitterly. "Of course Wei Chuanqiu said that, but I really barged in carelessly. Please forgive me, senior." Lu was holding his two swords that had pierced through the grilled fish and looked at them carefully. Upon hearing this, she quickly nodded at Old Man Mu and said, "Grandpa, he really didn't do it on purpose, just let him go this time." What? Before she could finish speaking, Old Man Mu had already knocked her on the head with his crutch and said angrily, "If you hadn't stolen my crutch to open the gate, how could he have barged in by chance? You are addicted to sneaking away now." It turned out that ever since Lu went out to see the prosperous world outside, her heart had become wild. The days in the wood-killing sea were too boring and not as fun as the colorful world outside. The last time she sneaked out, she was caught by Old Man Mu and locked up for a short while. She couldn't hold it in anymore, so she stole her grandfather's cane to open the Xianmen gate. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would turn around and knock her back when the Xianmen gate was opened? As a result, the Xianmen gate lost the support of Dharma power and closed on the spot, dragging Yu Qianqiu, who had just stepped into the Xianmen gate, in. This matter could be said to be coincidental, but it could also be said to be uncoincidental. Not to mention Yu Qianqiu, even Lu did not know the inside story. Only Old Man Du Mu himself knew. The ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea and the ancient language tree in the ancient forest were actually the same tree. It was like something in a mirror that was reflected in the two planes. However, it was different from the reflection in the mirror. It was not an illusion but a real object. Whether it was the ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea or the ancient language tree in the ancient forest, the ancient language trees on both sides would disappear at the same time. The ancient language tree was actually the hub that connected the two worlds. The ancient language tree was really ancient. It was the first tree that grew after the celestial realm was established. It could be said to be the ancestor of all trees in the celestial realm. Although it was blessed by nature and lived for a long time, it was unable to develop spiritual intelligence and cultivate immortality. However, it absorbed a considerable amount of the essence of the universe and gave birth to the first wood spirit in the celestial realm. It was the current owner of the wood-killing sea, Old Man Mu Muyuanzi. Later, due to the endless disputes between the three realms, Muyuanzi couldn't stand the disturbance and wanted to open up a world to live in. However, with his cultivation he was far from being able to open up a world alone. He had to borrow the magical effect of the ancient language tree, the ancestor of all trees, and use it as a medium to open up a small world. Thus, the wood-killing sea and the celestial realm overlapped. It was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds at the same time. It was very magical. It was also because the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea overlapped that with Mu Yuanzi's current cultivation, as long as there were plants in the two worlds, he could open the profound door at any time and go anywhere in the two worlds. However, Lu didn't have that ability. If she wanted to open the profound door and go between the two worlds, not only did she need the power of Mu Yuanzi's staff, she also needed to find a stable medium, which was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds. Therefore, it wasn't strange that the plants in the ancient forest treated the ancient language tree as the key to entering the wood-killing sea. A long time ago, when Mu Yuanzi's cultivation was still weak, he did often open the profound door here to go between the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea. After a long time, it was inevitable that he would be seen by others. However, with his current cultivation base, there was no longer a need for him to use the ancient language tree. This was also the reason why the plant demons in the ancient forest could no longer find the opportunity to enter the wood massacre sea through the ancient language tree. It was also because of this that this matter could be said to be both coincidental and unfortunate. After Mu Yuanzi listened to Yu Qianqiu's explanation and checked the position of his roasted fish, coupled with Lu Er's actions, he immediately understood. Chapter 11:17. Lu, who was reprimanded, threw away the sword with the grilled fish in it. Rubbing her forehead that was hit, she pouted in grievance. "The people here all let me play mahjong. No matter how I play, it's always me who makes the wrong tiles. It's too boring. Playing mahjong again. You can't make any progress in your cultivation only thinking about playing. Mu Yuanzi flew into a rage. His cane mercilessly hit Luer's head. The latter held her head and cried out in pain. Playing mahjong? Yu Qianzhou's expression had already collapsed. He looked speechlessly at the grandfather-granddaughter pair. He didn't think that mahjong had already become popular in Mu Monster Sea. Could it be that there were other mahjong friends here? Just as he was lost in his thoughts, Mu Yuanzi's cane was already pointed at him. He scolded, "It's all your fault. If I see you and Luer meet again, I'll kill you with one strike." Yu Qianzhou felt a toothache. He didn't think that saving someone's granddaughter would turn out to be wrong. It was simply unreasonable. However, the situation was stronger than him. This old man was even more awesome than Jin Tai and Bai Qi. He had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. If he couldn't provoke him, he could at least hide. Senior Mu, this junior knows his mistake. That. Yu Qianzhou first admitted his mistake. He looked around and weakly asked, "May I know how this junior should leave this place?" But in his heart, he was thinking, a gentleman's revenge is never too late. Wait until I plant the teleportation landmark and provoke old man by one day. Let's see who is more arrogant then. Luer, who was rubbing her forehead, suddenly widened her eyes. Yu Qianzhou, are you leaving? Her innocent eyes turned to look at her grandfather. They were filled with hope, as if she wanted to beg her grandfather to let Yu Qianzhou stay. Mu Yuanzi turned his head indifferently. He couldn't be bothered to look at her. He stared at Yu Qianzhou with a burning gaze and said word by word, "You've cultivated a technique to control the wood attribute?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned when he heard this. The words "would spell" suddenly flashed through his mind, but he did not practice it at all. He did not know why this old fellow would ask such a question. Amidst the clouds of doubt, a sudden gust of wind blew past. The golden leaves of the ancient language tree began to sway in the wind, and the murmuring of the wind sounded once again. The dreamy and illusory voice seemed to be recounting the endless vicissitudes of life, causing those who heard it to be worried. At the foot of the mountain, the forest was like a layer of mist rising in spirals from splashed ink. The mist came with the wind and blew on the three people on the mountain. Mu Yuanzi and Luer were used to this scene, so they did not feel anything. However, Yu Qianzhou felt a rich and fragrant spiritual energy seeping into his heart. His mind was instantly roused. Just as he was about to praise and flatter Mu Yuanzi, his brain twitched uncontrollably. In an instant, his vision turned black, and images of the starry night sky that he had been dreaming of appeared in his mind. The countless stars that seemed to be in a mess flipped through his mind night after night, and the speed was getting faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, the movements of the stars became traceable. However, this scene in his mind only lasted for a few moments. When the wind blew past and the fog dispersed, Yu Qianzhou woke up from his daze. Although he had woken up, his body trembled in the next moment. He looked somewhat excitedly at the mist that curled up from the ink-like layer of forest that covered the mountains and plains. The Eastern Star Map. It was the Eastern Star Map that had been deeply engraved in his mind. For so long he had been helpless against it. However, in that instant, it had suddenly been triggered. The pattern was so clear. Could it be that this was the land of great fortune to cultivate the wood's secret art? Yu Qianzhou's heart surged in that instant. He repeatedly repeated the three words, "Wood Killer C," in his heart. The grandfather and grandson both saw his abnormal reaction and followed his gaze down the mountain. They did not find anything out of place. Mu Yuanzi's walking stick suddenly slammed into the ground, causing the entire mountain to shake. He shouted in a low voice, "Are you trying to play the fool and avoid answering?" Yu Qianzhou's figure shook and he hurriedly cupped his hands and said with a bitter smile, "Senior, you've misunderstood me. I haven't cultivated any wood attribute cultivation technique. On the contrary, Senior's warning just now has enlightened me, and I've gained some comprehension. Perhaps I really can cultivate a wood attribute cultivation technique." Nonsense. Mu Yuanzi pointed his walking stick at Luer and said, "If you did not cultivate a wood secret art, how could you have smelled the fragrance on Luer's body? You actually dare to play such a small trick on this old man's head. If not for the fact that you saved Luer, you crafty scoundrel would have already lost your life under this old man's walking stick." Yu Qianzhou was confused by him. He felt that this old man was relying on his high cultivation to be unreasonable. He was both angry and amused as he said, "What does whether I cultivate a wood secret art or not have to do with being able to smell the fragrance on Luer's body? These are completely unrelated matters. Senior must drag it into this. Aren't you taking advantage of your power to bully others? Taking advantage of your power to bully others? What an ignorant junior. You actually dare to boast shamelessly in front of this old man. Mu Yuanzi's aura changed and directly pressed down on Yu Qianqiu with an unstoppable force. Lu Er turned pale with fright and stood in front of Yu Qianqiu with a whoosh. She looked at Mu Yuanzi and pleaded, "Grandpa! Get out of my way." Mu Yuanzi shouted with an imposing manner. "If I want to kill him, can you stop me?" Yu Qianqiu was already prepared to run away. At this point he also did not intend to endure it anymore. He immediately shouted angrily, "Old man Mu! Killing someone is just a matter of nodding your head to the ground. If you want to kill me, just say so. There's no need to splash dirty water on me. Damn it. You disrespectful old thing, and you still have the guts to shamelessly teach your granddaughter. It would be strange if you didn't teach her bad things. No wonder Lu Er always wants to run out. Anyone who sees a shameless old fellow like you will feel disgusted." Lu Er exclaimed. This was the first time she heard someone scold her grandfather like this. She hurriedly turned around and waved her hands at him. I didn't. I just want to go out and play. I don't hate grandfather at all." Mu Yuanzi was stunned on the spot. After so many years, this was the first time someone dared to speak to him like this. He was so angry that he laughed instead. "No one has ever doubted my character. Good. Today I will let you die knowing the truth." As he spoke, he waved his big sleeves and a thick aura spread out. What followed was the same fragrance as Lu Er's body, but it was even thicker than Lu Er's. Made one feel refreshed. Yu Qianqiu also couldn't help but take a few more breaths. "You smell it, right?" Mu Yuanzi looked at Yu Qianqiu's reaction and sneered. "Lu Er and I are the wood spirits of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth. Our bodies are born with a kind of aura that represents life. Ordinary people can't smell it at all. Only those who cultivate wood attribute spells can smell that special fragrance. You still dare to say that you don't cultivate wood attribute spells? You still dare to say that you didn't lie to this old man? So that's how it is. But that wasn't right either." Yu Qianqiu looked at the grandfather-granddaughter duo with a face full of doubt. He scratched his head and said, "I do have the possibility of cultivating wood attribute spells, but the key is that I haven't started cultivating yet." Mu Yuanzi snorted coldly and said, "Don't think that I don't know what you're up to. As long as a person who cultivates wood attribute spells devours a wood spirit, not only can he possess the innate magical powers of a wood spirit, but he can also transfer the cultivation of a wood spirit to himself. If it weren't for the fact that you accidentally barged in, this old man would have beaten you to death long ago. How could you still be talking nonsense here?" When Lu Er heard that Yu Qianqiu could devour a wood spirit, she was so scared that her face turned pale. After a moment of silence, he resolutely said, "I'll let you go this time, but if I find out that you're trying to fool this old man in the future, even if you have to ascend to the heavens or dive into the earth, I'll make sure you die under this old man's staff." As he spoke, he was about to wave his staff to open the profound gate and let Yu Qianqiu leave. "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily and raised his hand to stop him. "Let's talk about the future in the future. There's no need to be polite with an unreasonable person like you. From today onwards we'll return to our own paths. Let's first clear up the debts that we owe in the past. From now on, we'll go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other. Let's pretend we've never met before." "Could it be that I owe you something?" Mu Yuanzi sneered and stood with his staff on the ground, revealing an expression that didn't know what was good for him. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at Lu Er. He said with righteous indignation, "Back then there were a few experts who wanted to molest Lu Er. It was I who risked my life to save Lu Er's life, and also protected Lu Er's innocence. How much is this debt worth? How should this debt be settled?" Chapter 11:18. Lu Er was stunned on the spot as she recalled the situation back then. She didn't know whether those people who bullied her were experts or not, but she didn't see how much danger Yu Qianqiu had risked to save her. It seemed like he had scared those people away the moment he appeared. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with some grievance and pouted. Hearing Yu Qianqiu's words, it seemed like he wanted to draw a line between them. Mu Yuanzi choked for a moment. He didn't expect this fellow to act like a scoundrel, asking for a reward after doing a good deed. He was too tasteless. However, in all these years only others owed him, Mu Yuanzi, favors. He had never owed anyone a favor. Moreover, this person had indeed saved his granddaughter. Since he had opened his mouth, he wasn't as thick-skinned as Yu Qianqiu to deny it. This was the weakness of a person who thought highly of himself. Yu Qianqiu took advantage of this point and acted like a scoundrel. How do you want to settle this debt? How much money do you want? Mu Yuanzi spat out word by word. He was just short of beating someone up. Although his cultivation was high, he didn't have a single spirit stone on hand. When it came to money, he really had a headache. Money? I am the dignified sect master of the world commerce. Do I still lack spirit stones? Yu Qianqiu said with a face full of disdain. I, Yu Qianqiu, have always been a straightforward and upright person. I won't beat around the bush. I am about to cultivate a set of wood attribute spells. Your wood ocean of massacre is beneficial to my cultivation. I want to borrow your precious land to cultivate in seclusion. After this, the grudges between us will be settled. How about it? Mu Yuanzi's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect that this person would dare to say he wanted to cultivate a wood attribute spell in front of him. Moreover, he wanted to do it right under his nose. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was extremely daring. After staring at Yu Qianqiu for a while, he stopped looking at him and turned around to face the vast sea of Musha Hai with his walking stick and said slowly, 1 year. I'll give you 1 year's time. I don't care how long you need to go into seclusion. Once the 1-year period is over, you must immediately scram out of the Wood Killer Sea. After that, you're not allowed to meet Lu again. Otherwise, I'll make sure you die. These words meant that he had agreed to Yu Qianqiu, but he added another condition. Grandpa. Lu called out, feeling wronged. Then she looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook her head repeatedly, signaling him not to agree. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, turned his head away guiltily, pretending not to see anything. Judging from his past experience, he reckoned that it would not take more than a year to practice the wood secret art. He then shouted, Fine. It's a deal. After hearing the reply, Mu Yuanzi let out a cold snort. Ignoring Lu, his figure flashed and he disappeared from the mountain peak. He was not afraid that Yu Qianqiu would cause any trouble in the Wood Killer Sea, because if something happened, Yu Qianqiu would have nowhere to run even if he wanted to. This was his territory. As long as he did not open the Gate of Wonders, taking care of Yu Qianqiu would be a piece of cake. Under the ancient language tree at the mountain peak, Lu buried her head to the side with a depressed expression, not making a sound. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his nose helplessly, coughed and said, Lu, where are your parents? It's my first time here, so I should pay them a visit. Lu is a wood spirit, how could I have parents? Lu lowered her head and muttered softly. Yu Qianqiu made an oh sound when he heard this. Then he turned to a relaxed smile and said, Lu, are you angry at me? Lu did not make a sound, indicating her tacit agreement. Yu Qianqiu helplessly smiled bitterly. With a hint of a fawning tone, he half coaxed and half begged, Lu, I want to choose a place to cultivate, can you bring me around the Wood Killer Sea to look around? The little lass was soft-hearted and could not resist coaxing. She only hesitated for a short while before revealing a reluctant expression. She pouted and said, What's so good about the Wood Killer Sea? It's the same everywhere. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and waved his hand to retrieve the 2 swords with the grilled fish stuck in them. He directly floated in the air. When Lu also flew up, he looked around and asked, Where do you and your grandfather usually live? Lu heard this and flew into the distance without a word. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment before he followed. Flying over a small plain in a valley, he saw a towering tree that had fallen to the ground and bloomed. The lush canopy covered an area of several miles. There were many egrets nesting on the canopy, and on the plain grassland that was enshrouded in white mist, there were many bison coming and going in groups. It was a natural and beautiful scene. Yu Qianqiu did not know why the little lass brought him here, but he saw Lu point at the tree on the plain and say, There is a hole in the tree trunk that spirals upwards. It's a natural residence and it's very spacious. Grandfather and I live in there. Oh. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He thought that it was naturally no problem for people to live in such a large tree trunk, so he asked, You said that the people in the Wood Killer Sea always let you play mahjong. Are there other people living in the treehouse? Only grandfather and I live in the treehouse. Other people do not dare to come here and disturb grandfather. Lu waved her hand and pointed at the vast Wood Killer Sea and said, They are scattered in the forest in all directions to practice. When I want to play mahjong, I will sneak into the forest to find them. Yu Qianqiu replied with an, Oh. He wanted to visit the treehouse to see what it was like. However, he thought that old man Mu did not like him and that going there would only be a thrill, so he dismissed the idea. He looked around and sighed. I'd better find a place to practice in seclusion. Luer did not object, and the two went straight to the west one after another. Looking down from the sky, the terrain of the entire Woodkiller Sea was very simple. There were hills, mountains, plains, lakes, and rivers. The ground was mostly covered with green vegetation. There were no deserts, no Gobi, no seas, and no snowfields. It was a planet with green vegetation, and it was not without reason that it was named Woodkiller Sea. The area of this green planet was not big. It was at most 1/10 of the size of the human world that Xianxia was in. The two flew and stopped for less than a day, and they had already circled the Woodkiller Sea once and flew to the sky above the ancient language tree. There was nothing to be picky about here if he wanted to practice in seclusion. Finally, Xianxia pointed to a dense forest that was enshrouded in white fog and asked, "There won't be any problems if I go to that forest to practice in seclusion, right? I'll go greet them. They won't disturb you." Luer, who was in a much better mood, flew down first, and Xianxia followed closely behind. The them that Luer referred to were actually some of the plant demons in the forest. They were all dressed in strange attire, and when they saw Luer, they were very respectful. Luer told them the purpose of Xianxia's visit, and the group of plant demons immediately obeyed. It was as if Luer was their master. After the plant demons memorized Xianxia's appearance, they all disappeared into the forest, and the silent Xianxia impatiently sat cross-legged in the dense fog of the forest. Seeing that he entered the state so quickly, Luer pouted unhappily. She was blaming him for burning the bridge after crossing it. Little did she know that when Xianxia descended into this dense forest that was enshrouded in spiritual fog, the nerves in his brain immediately twitched, and the vast star map in his brain was immediately activated. However, seeing that there were many living people present, he had no choice but to resist. When all the living people left, he immediately sat cross-legged and entered the state, afraid that he would miss the opportunity to comprehend the wood art. Although Luer was a little unhappy, she didn't dare to disturb him. She quietly floated a few miles away, but she didn't go too far. Moreover, she would often sneak back to observe Xianxia's movements. The forest was quiet and the dense fog drifted. Xianxia, who was sitting cross-legged, was faintly discernible in the fog, like an old monk in meditation, not moving at all. After a few days, his eyebrows gradually locked together, as if he had encountered something he couldn't figure out. Luer, who had been secretly observing him, was very curious. She didn't know what kind of heart demon he had encountered in the process of cultivation that he couldn't resolve, so she flew and sat on the trunk of an ancient tree not far from Xianxia, and continued to secretly observe Xianxia. After another half a month, Xianxia's tightly locked eyebrows finally began to gradually relax, as if he had already found a solution to the problem. He was here in seclusion to comprehend the wood art. Outside in the ancient forest, the great bright wheel was becoming more and more anxious under the ancient language tree. The fish no longer had the mood to continue roasting, but it couldn't find a better solution, so it could only wait anxiously under the ancient language tree. However, the others, led by Jin Tai and Bai Qi, were still unwilling to give up. They continued to search in the ancient forest, and they had almost searched the entire ancient forest. In the blink of an eye, a month's time quickly passed. Luer, who felt that it was somewhat dull, gradually lost her patience. She was currently lying on the trunk of the tree with her hands supporting her chin, and her legs hooking and kicking as she watched two praying mantises fight. Just as the two little insects were entangled and biting each other, a strange throbbing suddenly spread out from under the tree. The movements of the two biting insects froze, as if they had also sensed that something was amiss. Luer looked down the tree with some surprise. She saw that the mist around Xianxia was spreading out in all directions like ripples. Not long after, the mist in this area of the forest was completely dispersed without a trace. Luer, who was feeling strange, suddenly stood up. She turned her head left and right to look in all directions, and a strange green splendor appeared in her eyes. She immediately discovered that the surrounding trees and vines were continuously emitting indiscernible specks of green light. They scattered and fluttered towards Xianxia's body and gathered on his body. At first, it was just specks of green light probing. Then it developed into patches. The specks of green light swarmed into the pores all over Xianxia's body. He's absorbing the wood element. Luer cried out in shock. Then she quickly covered her mouth, afraid that she would disturb Xianxia's cultivation. However, it didn't take long before Luer felt afraid. The specks of green light of the wood element were pouring out of the trees in all directions at a terrifying speed, gathering on the cross-legged sitting Xianxia's body in an endless stream. Those ancient trees that had grown for hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years, as well as the vines on the ground, were all withering at a visible speed. Chapter 11:19. Once these vibrant vines and trees lost the support of the wood element in their bodies, they would wither like rotten wood. But how could Xianxia care about this? He had just successfully cultivated the wood art, and his body was extremely comfortable. He needed to familiarize himself with the wood art and absorb the wood element to form a crystal core in his dantian. How could he care about the life and death of these plants? As he became more and more proficient with the wood art, the speed at which he absorbed the wood element also became faster and faster. The endless cyan light began to converge into a flood, rolling in from all directions. The withering speed of the surrounding flowers and trees immediately increased. The fresh flowers lost their vibrant colors, the grass lost its green color and turned yellow, and the ancient, towering trees quickly lost their luster. If one looked down from the sky, they would see a brownish-yellow disk in the dense forest expanding at a visible speed. This vibrant forest was quickly losing its vitality. What made Luer terrified was that as the suction force from Xianxia's body grew stronger, the wood element in her body would also rapidly flow away if she did not suppress it. It would converge into the surging cyan flood and be absorbed into Xianxia's body. Those plant monsters that she had persuaded to leave were also frightened. The wood element supporting their bodies was rapidly flowing away. Thus they could no longer hide and rushed back from all directions. They were all frightened after seeing what Xianxia was doing. He was simply exterminating all the plants in this forest. The plant monsters' trembling gazes shifted to Luer, who was standing on the dead tree. After everyone secretly communicated, they sent out their elders. A seemingly trembling old man leaped onto the branch of the dead tree and repeatedly bowed to Luer. "Miss, quickly stop him. Otherwise everyone will not be able to survive." Xianxia had already mastered the wood art and could split his attention to his surroundings. After all, this was not an absolutely safe place, so he had to be careful and vigilant. In reality, he had already heard the old man's complaints, but he pretended not to know. He was at the crucial moment of condensing the wood art crystal core, so how could he stop midway? He continued to do what he was doing. Luer, who had regained her senses, looked at her surroundings and said hurriedly, "You guys quickly go back and defend your main bodies." Everyone didn't even have the time to thank him. They immediately dispersed and flew in all directions, quickly merging into their own bodies. The wood element that protected their bodies stopped leaking. Thus, in the gradually expanding brownish-yellow disk in the dense forest, some sporadic discordant green appeared. In the center of the wood-killer sea, in the hollow belly of an ancient tree on a valley plain, a stream of light shot into the sky. Muyuanzi was floating in the air. He had also sensed the abnormal activity in the wood massacre sea. He looked at the expanding brown circle of death in bewilderment and was immediately shocked. He turned into a streak of light and shot over. As soon as he flew over, he could easily see Xianxia sitting cross-legged. The dense leaves covering Xianxia had withered and died. The green wood element that was gathering from all directions was crazily pouring into Xianxia's body. Almost all the plants within a radius of 10 miles had died. Muyuanzi immediately shouted angrily, "How dare you? Stop at once." Upon hearing this, Xianxia was shocked. He was afraid that the old man would stop, so he hurriedly shouted angrily, "Senior Mu, you promised to let me cultivate in seclusion in the wood massacre sea for a year. Are you going to go back on your word?" Although he had opened his eyes to speak, he didn't stop absorbing the wood element. Muyuanzi had already scurried down. He glared at Luer as if blaming her for not stopping him. Then he stared at Xianxia and said sternly, "If you don't stop, don't blame me for forcefully interrupting your cultivation and causing you to suffer from qi deviation. Old man Mu, you're going back on your word. You're going too far." Xianxia was a little anxious and scolded him on the spot. "I promised you to cultivate in the wood massacre sea, but I didn't allow you to forcefully absorb the wood element in my wood massacre sea." Muyuanzi shouted angrily. He raised the wooden staff in his hand and slashed it in all directions with an imposing manner as sharp as a knife. It immediately cut off Xianxia's absorption of the wood element in the wood massacre sea. The torrential current that had lost its destination quickly flowed towards the head of the wooden staff in Muyuanzi's hand. Xianxia's expression changed drastically. Seeing that this old man had ruined his plan, he was so angry that he was about to use all his strength to destroy the wood massacre sea as revenge. But suddenly he was startled. Then, a joyful expression appeared on his face and he quickly closed his eyes. Yu Qianzhou's dantian shook fiercely. He sent his divine sense into his dantian to take a look. He saw that there was another crystal core shining with a blue light in his dantian. It formed a circle with the red crystal core representing the fire art, the black crystal core representing the water art, the white crystal core representing the gold art, and the yellow crystal core representing the earth art. Yu Qianzhou was immediately overjoyed. He didn't expect that the green crystal core that represented the wood art would actually condense at the critical moment when the wood element was cut off. The heavens were really on his side. When they turned around, they discovered that the 2 handfuls of divine great spirit stones in Yu Qianzhou's hands had their spiritual energy sucked dry, turning from black to grayish-white. Even Yu Qianzhou himself seemed to be frightened by his own actions. Although his eyes were closed, the muscles on his face twitched violently. The dried-up spirit stones in his hands fell to the ground with a huala sound, and 2 more handfuls of divine great spirit stones appeared in Yu Qianzhou's hands. However, it felt like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. With 2 handfuls of spirit stones in his hands, the spiritual energy was sucked dry in a breath's time. Even after grabbing more than a dozen handfuls of spirit stones, he still felt that it was too slow. Fortunately, he had already forged his immortal physique. If it was in the past, his meridians wouldn't have been able to withstand such an overload of spiritual energy. All of a sudden, Yu Qianzhou's arms moved and the ground caved in, forming a deep funnel. Yu Qianzhou was sitting in the center of the funnel. The grandfather and grandson duo were confused as to what Yu Qianzhou was doing, but the storage bracelet on Yu Qianzhou's wrist emitted a series of rattling noises. Black spirit stones gushed out like a fountain, filling up the entire funnel in an instant, burying Yu Qianzhou inside. Grandfather. What is he doing? Lu couldn't help asking curiously. Mu Yuanzi had also forgotten about the previous matter. His eyes were filled with doubt as he shook his head and said, "It seems like he is absorbing the spiritual energy from the spirit stones to cultivate. But how can his body endure absorbing so much spiritual energy in such a short period of time? I have also never seen such a thing before. We'll know if we continue watching." Lu nodded and said, "Oh. How could the grandfather and grandson duo know that the 5 crystal cores in Yu Qianzhou's dantian were spinning rapidly? It was like a bottomless black hole. No matter how much spiritual energy there was, it would still be sucked in without any resistance. If Yu Qianzhou didn't use spiritual energy to fill up his dantian, then even his intestines, heart and lungs would be sucked in." In less than a moment, the large amount of black spirit stones that were burying Yu Qianzhou in the funnel gradually turned grayish-white. Almost at the same time that the large amount of spiritual energy in the spirit stones was exhausted, there was a crashing sound as the grayish-white spirit stones all flowed out from the bottom of the funnel. They saw a large, black hole appear at the bottom of the funnel under Yu Qianzhou's butt. After all the dried-up spirit stones were drained, the black hole quickly healed. The storage bracelet on Yu Qianzhou's wrist once again spewed out a large amount of spirit stones to bury himself. The grandfather and grandson duo were dumbstruck. Chapter 11:20. What surprised him even more was that even though Yu Qianzhou had cast a technique to create such a large hole in the ground with his cultivation, he actually didn't notice much movement. This scene caused Mu Yuanzi's pupils to shrink and his eyelids to twitch. As time passed, the spirit stones in the underground funnel were constantly replaced. Spirit stones were continuously consumed, and there were no signs of it stopping. The grandfather and grandson duo kept watching from the side, and the more they watched, the more shocked they became. Nearly 100 spirit stones had been consumed just like that. Let alone Mu Yuanzi, even Lu could see that it was impossible for a person's body to contain such a large amount of spiritual energy. After 100 or so spirit stones, the grandfather and grandson duo, who were gradually getting used to this, suddenly realized that the spirit stones that had been sucked dry were not replaced in time. The grandfather and grandson duo's gazes immediately focused on the inside of the funnel. Mu Yuanzi even released his divine sense into the pile of dried-up spirit stones to investigate. One day later, all the spirit stones in the funnel suddenly flowed into the ground, and the funnel that was sunken into the ground slowly bulged up. Yu Qianzhou, who was standing in the center of the funnel, also rose up. The ground under his feet became flat again as if nothing had happened. Luer's eyes blinked and she looked curiously at Yu Qianzhou. Mu Yuanzi looked at the smiling Yu Qianzhou and sized him up. Suddenly, his expression shook, and he cried out involuntarily, You directly advanced from the initial stage of minor immortal to the initial stage of exalted immortal? Lu couldn't help but let out an ah when she heard this. Yu Qianqiu was in high spirits and his face was beaming with joy. He chuckled and cupped his hands at the two, saying, "This is all thanks to Senior's feng shui treasured land." Mu Yuanzi's eyes were filled with bewilderment, but they gradually returned to normal. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "You also know how to control the earth attribute?" Yu Qianqiu was startled and he knew he couldn't hide it anymore, so he said perfunctorily, "I know a thing or two." Mu Yuanzi slowly turned around and after a moment of silence he looked back at Yu Qianqiu and said indifferently, "I don't care what secrets you're hiding, this old man hopes that you remember what you said. After a year, scram out of Woodkiller Sea and never meet Lu'er again." Yu Qianqiu was startled and the joy on his face disappeared without a trace. He then snorted coldly, "I, Yu Qianqiu, am a man of my word. I never go back on my word, unlike some people who don't keep their word." There was a hidden meaning in his words, hinting that Mu Yuanzi had forcefully interrupted his cultivation. Mu Yuanzi wasn't an idiot. How could he not understand the meaning behind Mu Yuanzi's words? Mu Yuanzi didn't make a fuss. He stabbed the wooden staff in his hand into the ground, and a thin layer of azure light immediately enveloped the large head of the staff. The azure light rushed along the body of the staff, and when it reached the ground, it quickly spread out like ripples, rushing into the dense forest in all directions. What a dense wood attribute, so dense that it could be seen with the naked eye. Yu Qianqiu was inwardly shocked. He saw that wherever the green light spread, the withered flowers and grass on the ground immediately regained their vitality. The withered trees in the surroundings also sprouted, and new lush green leaves grew at a visible rate. Looking down from the sky, one could see a green ripple appear in the center of the withered forest, and then it quickly spread to the entire withered forest. Not long after, it regained its vitality, and the fresh green was even more eye-catching than the surrounding forest. Mu Yuanzi flew into the sky from the center of the new green, and swept his eyes across the surroundings. Then he turned into a stream of light and flew into the distance. The legendary withered tree coming back to life. Yu Qianqiu was flabbergasted as he looked at his surroundings. These words suddenly popped up in his mind. When he came back to his senses, he discovered that Mu Yuanzi had already left, and only Lu'er was looking at him curiously. Yu Qianqiu looked at his hands, and his right hand suddenly condensed into a claw that covered a newly grown green vine not far away. The small green vine shook violently for a moment, and then it quickly grew, growing longer and thicker at a visible rate. It coiled around a large tree, and as it grew, the plants in a small area around it slowly withered, as if all their energy had been sucked dry by the growth of this long vine. The condensed 5 claws suddenly clenched, and the thick vine that had turned from a new vine to an old vine suddenly tightened around the trunk of the large tree. It tightened even more and the vine sank into the tree trunk. "What are you trying to do?" Just as Lu'er asked weakly, she heard several snapping sounds. The vine that was coiled around the tree trunk could not withstand the great force, and actually broke into several pieces. Other than leaving a few deep marks on the tree trunk, it was not a big deal. Yu Qianqiu turned a deaf ear to Lu'er's words. His clenched fist once again turned into a claw, and the thick vine that had broken into several pieces violently shook and grew again. However, before it could recover to half its original length, it stopped growing. No matter how Yu Qianqiu used the wood art to speed up its growth, it could not grow again. He saw that the ground around the vine had turned yellow, as if all the nutrients on the ground had been sucked dry by it. The expression on Yu Qianqiu's face twitched and he looked around. In his heart, he wondered what kind of powerful killing move such a tiny little fellow could unleash. But on second thought, as the saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover. The more unremarkable the little fellow was, the more unexpected it might be. Wasn't there a saying that concentrated was the essence? It must not be underestimated. Lu'er closed her eyes slightly, and her delicate palm suddenly rippled with a faint green brilliance. Not long later, like performing magic, that tiny little fellow in her palm evolved into hundreds of similar illusions. Not long after, the illusions gradually solidified, and the brilliance on her palm disappeared. Hundreds of sesame-sized brown flower seeds laid in Lu'er's palm. Did you see it? Lu'er opened her eyes and she proudly spread out her palm. What did this mean? Yu Qianqiu's face was bewildered. He was fooled by this magic-like method. He scratched his head and stared at the hundreds of flower seeds in confusion. After looking for a while, he still couldn't see any powerful killing move. He thought to himself, Could it be that these little fellows could explode like an atomic bomb? He raised his head hesitantly and asked, this is, don't look down on their small size. Grandpa said that no matter if it's us wood spirits or those wood cultivators, only those who can master this move have truly grasped the true essence of the wood attribute spell. I spent many years to learn it. Warned him very seriously. Xianxia's face immediately turned solemn and he thought to himself, oh my, the true essence of the wood attribute spell. As expected, the powerful ones are still to come. He nodded repeatedly and said, don't worry about this. I, Xianxia, am not an ignorant person who looks down on others. Continue, I will definitely learn humbly. Since you can absorb the wood element, that means you can also learn this move. As Luer spoke, she waved her hand like a fairy scattering flowers. Hundreds of sesame-sized brown flower seeds were scattered into the forest. Immediately after, new green buds sprouted from the ground at a visible speed, slowly growing into a plant. The flower buds also rapidly bloomed on the branches. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of newly sprouted yellow flowers swayed in the forest with a fresh fragrance. It was very pleasing to the eye. Xianxia foolishly looked at the yellow flowers without blinking, waiting for the subsequent explosion of power. He was even considering if he should move further away to watch in case he was accidentally injured. Who knew that after waiting for a while, there would be no reaction? Tilting his head to look, he saw Luer proudly standing there with her hands behind her back, looking like she was waiting for his praise. Xianxia swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He asked in a somewhat incredulous and trembling voice, Luer, it's over? Yeah. Don't tell me you want to watch it again? Chapter 11:21. It's over. I've failed miserably in a simple task today. As expected, the more harmless something seemed, the easier it was to deceive people. Xianxia immediately had difficulty breathing, his brain lacking oxygen. His face darkened as he stared at Luer and gritted his teeth. Luer, you tricked me? If they weren't in someone else's territory, he would tie her up and beat her up before saying anything else. A gentleman prefers death to humiliation. Luer was stunned. How did I trick you? Xianxia was exasperated and speechless as he pointed at the sesame seed on her palm and said indignantly, what kind of powerful killer move is this? Can plants kill people? You're still saying you're not tricking me? Killing people? Why would you kill people for no reason? Luer waved her hands fearfully. I've never learned those killing moves. Even if Grandpa told me to learn them to defend myself, I wouldn't learn them. Xianxia's embarrassment and anger disappeared. He raised his eyebrows and said, if that's the case, it's not that there aren't powerful killing moves among the wood attribute spells, but you don't know. His tone suddenly took a 360-degree turn. Like a wolf grandmother, he said patiently, does your grandpa know a lot? He remembered that Bai Changchun once said that the 5-element spell he cultivated was a great spell of the origin of heaven and earth. After mastering it, it would be very powerful. Even Bai Changchun himself sighed at his inferiority. But now that he had completely mastered the 5-element spell, other than his cultivation increasing a little, he didn't find it very powerful. It was far from old man Bai's impressive means. He faintly felt that he had a mountain of treasures, but he didn't find the key to open it. Luer nodded, then quickly shook her head. Although Grandpa knows, he won't teach it to outsiders. Teach it to outsiders, again? Xianxia asked curiously, you mean your grandpa once taught powerful killing moves to others? Luer acknowledged and said, back then when my spiritual consciousness was first awakened, it was nurtured in Grandpa's staff and had yet to take form. I once saw a few of Grandpa's friends coming to Wood Killer Sea from the outside world. I heard from Grandpa that their cultivations were very profound, even more powerful than Grandpa's. One of them was said to be the #1 expert of the 3 realms, called Demonic God Knight. Demon God? Xianxia was shocked. Did your grandfather impart a powerful killer move to Demon God? That's not right. Even if a normal person knew about a wood elementalist killer move, they wouldn't be able to practice it. Could it be that the Fiend Celestial also knows wood elemental spells? Luer shook her head and said, no. At that time there were many things that I didn't understand. Later on, I heard from Grandpa that Demon God Knight had many experts under him. One of them was called Demon King Clear Sky, who was also a wood cultivator. Demon God Knight once asked Grandpa for a set of spells suitable for wood cultivators for that subordinate of his. Grandpa wanted to show off that his abilities weren't bad, so he gave Demon God Knight a set of green devil seed cultivation spells. Later on, when the three realms were in chaos, Demon God Knight went berserk and led his subordinates to massacre the three realms. Only then did Grandpa know that he had caused trouble. This matter made Grandpa very vexed, and from then on he didn't easily impart spells anymore. Green devil seed? Is that a very powerful killer move? Xianxia licked his lips covetously. Grandpa said that once the green devil seed is injected into the human body, it will silently take root and sprout in the human body. The person won't be able to detect it at all. After it completely takes over the body, it will start to take effect and the entire person will turn green. Under the control of the caster, they will become a wood puppet. The scariest thing is that the person under the spell is clearly conscious, but their own body will no longer have the slightest connection with them. No matter how high their cultivation is, they won't be able to control themselves. They can only watch helplessly as they do things that they don't want to do, suffering mental torture, Luer said with some horror. Why was it somewhat similar to Yan Zhuixing's demon eye ecstasy? However, the torture that made one's consciousness remain conscious was even more vicious. Xianxia pondered and said with a frown, "Is there no way to break it?" "There is." Luer nodded and said, "Grandpa said that anyone who cultivates this art can break it. However, the prerequisite is that their cultivation is higher than the caster. Other than that, there is no other way to break it." Back then, when Grandpa learned that Demon God Knight's subordinate, the Clear Sky Great Demon King, used this art to wreak havoc in the three realms, he personally went to find Demon God Knight to denounce him. Demon God Knight made that Clear Sky Great Demon King stop using this art. After that, Demon God went to the God Realm, and the Demon Realm was sealed, so this art never appeared in the three realms again. *CK. One's cultivation needs to be higher than the caster, and one has to cultivate this art to be able to break it. That Clear Sky Great Demon King was able to follow Demon God, so his cultivation must be extraordinary. Then other than him, who else can break it? Xianxia said in shock. There's also Grandpa. Luer shook her head and said, as for whether there are others who can break it, even Grandpa didn't discover it. Looks like it is indeed more vicious than Demon Eye Ecstasy. At least, Demon Eye Ecstasy is not difficult to break. Xianxia was secretly shocked, and faintly worried that that bullshit Clear Sky Great Demon King would run out from the demon realm again. However, after thinking about it, he felt that the possibility was not too high and he was worrying too much. He rubbed his hands and asked, "Are there any other powerful killing moves among the wood attribute arts?" Luer finally became alert and she asked in bewilderment, "Do you really want to learn those powerful killing moves?" Having his intentions seen through, Xianxia coughed and said with a solemn expression, "I just want to understand a little more in case I fall into someone else's hands one day. It's better to be prepared." "Even if you want to learn, Grandpa won't teach you," Luer said with a pout. Xianxia's expression stiffened. Thinking that it was indeed impossible for the old fellow to teach him, he couldn't help but become dispirited. Seeing that he was unhappy, Luer hurriedly approached and comforted him. Actually, the true strength of the wood attribute arts is not in those powerful killing moves. It doesn't matter whether you learn them or not. Xianxia's half-lidded eyelids suddenly opened, rippling with a strange splendor. His eyes glowed again and he moved his head closer to secretly ask in a low voice, "Luer, could it be that there is an even more powerful secret hidden in the wood attribute arts?" Luer said with a slightly reminiscing expression, "I remember once I asked Grandpa how I was born into this world, and why I didn't have parents. So, Grandpa talked to me about the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth, saying that we are the wood spirits born from the essence of the universe, and that we are the most mystical and the greatest of the 5 great spirits." The most mystical and the greatest? The splendor in Xianxia's eyes became even brighter, and he asked anxiously, "What did your grandpa say?" Luer tilted her head and recalled, "Grandpa said that after many years of comprehension, he discovered that the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth should have their own true meaning of life, and our wood spirits is the most profound, representing the most mysterious life in the universe. Therefore, the true meaning that we pursue should be the word life. If we really comprehend the profound meaning of life, we will naturally be very, very powerful." Just this. Xianxia rolled his eyes on the spot. He wouldn't hide somewhere and slowly comprehend for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, just for the sake of some profound meaning of life. If he did that, he would definitely go crazy. His creed was that 10,000 years was too long, and he should seize every moment. Xianxia casually asked with a lack of interest, "What is the true meaning that the other 4 spirits of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth pursue?" The little girl didn't know how to read a person's expression, and still replied very seriously, I also asked Grandpa about this. Grandpa said he didn't know either, but Grandpa had guessed that if anyone could comprehend all the true meanings of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth, they would very likely become immortal and reach the powerful realm of eternal life. Immortal and immortal? Xianxia thought of the fact that he had already cultivated the 5 elemental arts, and couldn't help but stare blankly. Then he snorted disdainfully. It was more like having nothing to do after eating. Just one true meaning was enough, and to spend countless years to comprehend 5 true meanings, it was more like there was something wrong with his brain. He had now completely lost interest. Just as he retracted his head that was in front of Luer, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise. His nostrils flared, and he stuck his head in front of Luer again. He sniffed a few times and looked at Luer strangely. Why can't I smell the fragrance on your body anymore? Luer, who was proud of herself as a teacher, had a huge change in expression when she heard this. She seemed to have thought of something and took a few steps back. She looked at Xianxia with incomparable horror and said, Grandpa said that humans who have cultivated the wood elemental arts all desire to devour us wood spirits. Could it be that you also want to? Could it be that he couldn't smell the fragrance of the wood spirits because he had cultivated the wood elemental arts? Why was it the exact opposite of what Old Man Mu said? This thought flashed quickly in Xianxia's mind. He looked at Luer, who was abnormally afraid of him, and felt a little helpless. He didn't know what to say. To be honest, Xianxia wasn't a good person at all. He really had the crooked thought of devouring Luer just now. When he saw that Old Man Mu was too arrogant and thought that he was trapped in the Wood Killer Sea and couldn't escape, he wanted to take the opportunity to kidnap Luer and bring her to Utopia, then see how he could devour her. But Xianxia wasn't completely evil. Facing the cute and innocent Luer, he really couldn't imagine what it would be like if he devoured her. He couldn't bear to do it. Instead, he hoped that Luer could be a little more evil. It would be best if she could be so evil that he wanted to kill her. Then, he would be able to do evil things with a clear conscience. But, Luer, don't worry, I'm a good person. I won't do those kinds of things that bad people do. Xianxia had a bitter smile on his face as he was defeated by Luer. Now he had his eyes on Mu Yuanzi, but Mu Yuanzi's cultivation was too high. It was not something he could deal with his current cultivation. Really? Luer asked a little timidly. Sigh. Whether you believe me or not, I'm going to leave the Wood Killer Sea anyway. You don't have to worry. Xianxia looked around. He really couldn't stay any longer. It wasn't that he didn't want to continue staying in the Wood Killer Sea to think of a way to steal the killer moves related to the wood elemental arts, but he had unknowingly stayed here for almost 2 months while cultivating. He didn't know what the situation outside was like, and he was really worried that something would happen to the daeming wheel. Xianxia only paused in his footsteps and listened to her words expressionlessly. In the end, he didn't even turn his head. He let Luer cry her heart out and walked forward with large steps. His figure disappeared along with the wall of profound light. The moment Xianxia stepped into the wall of profound light, the scenery in front of him suddenly changed. He saw the exposed red cliff and the ancient language tree with golden leaves. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to the place he left. Even though he had experienced this once before, it still felt like a dream. Looking back, the wall of profound light had already disappeared. Where did you go? Suddenly someone spoke. Xianxia jumped in fright. He raised his head and saw Deming Luan standing on the branch of the ancient language tree looking at him. He immediately let out a sigh of relief and said, I didn't expect you to still be here. If I couldn't find you, how would I explain to Wei Chuanxiu and the rest? Deming Luan flashed down from the tree and said with a frown, If I didn't guess wrong, you should have gone to Wood Killer Sea. Xianxia nodded his head and looked around. Jintai and the rest still haven't moved? Did anything happen? They should still be searching everywhere. This is the last thing Jintai and the rest rely on to make a comeback. They won't let it go if they don't find it. Otherwise they will definitely summon us. After Deming Luan finished, he asked, What happened to Wood Killer Sea? How did you get involved all of a sudden? This isn't the place to talk about this. I'll slowly tell you when we get back. Xianxia looked around and saw that there was no one around. He casually took out the human skin mask and put it on his face. Previously, when he was roasting the fish, he was afraid that the smoke and fire would cause the mask to change color, making it inconvenient to use in the future, so he took it off. Now that the matter wasn't over, he still had to wear it and continue pretending to be awesome. Just as he finished dressing up, the two of them were startled at the same time. They quickly took out the communication jade talismans that Jintai had distributed to everyone. The two of them held the jade talismans for a while and looked at each other in dismay. They then crushed the jade talismans in unison. After doing this, Yu Qianzhou sneered, "That madman Jintai really dared to do this." It's not surprising. He has always been an extreme person. To achieve his goals he would do anything. Deming Luan frowned and said, "Are we really going to do as he said?" It turned out that the two of them had just received a message from Jintai. Jintai ordered them to immediately set fire to their respective locations in the ancient forest. Moreover, the requirement was to set the fire. Those who disobeyed would be killed without mercy. There was no room for discussion. If others heard this order, they would definitely be confused. Unfortunately, the two of them had heard Jintai and Bai Qi casually mention this matter, so they knew what kind of conspiracy it was. Who would listen to him? This guy only cares about himself. He doesn't care about the lives of his subordinates. Yu Qianzhou snorted disdainfully and pouted his lips. "Don't you know what kind of place this is? If we really set a few fires here, once we alarm the grasswood spirits in the ancient forest, we will incur the wrath of the masses. The taste of being beaten up by the masses will not be good. At that time, you and I will not be able to bear the consequences. The others don't know about the conspiracy and have no way out. They will most likely do as we say." Deming Luan let out a long sigh. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou fell into silence. He thought of Tai Shu Xian and Qing Yang and didn't know what would happen to them. Thinking about it, he suddenly exclaimed, "What do you mean by setting fire now? Could it be that Jintai and Bai Qi have already taken the risk to lure Wang Qing and the others here? Otherwise there is no point in setting fire now. It's not impossible. The two of them saw that they couldn't find that person to help after such a long time, so they won't keep delaying. Otherwise, when Wang Qing and the others stabilize the forces in the immortal and netherworld, they will have spies everywhere in the immortal and netherworld." Deming Luan pondered for a moment, then said, "At that time, no matter where they escape to, they will inevitably be discovered by Wang Qing and the others. How can they run around like now? I'm afraid that they won't even be able to find a foothold in the three realms. So, it is very likely that Jintai and Bai Qi have already taken the risk. They are just hiding it from everyone and treating everyone as chess pieces." Yu Qianzhou nodded in agreement. Suddenly his gaze stopped in the distance. He was stunned and said, "Someone has already started to do as Jintai said." Deming Luan looked back and saw a cloud of thick smoke rising in the distant sky. Not long after, the sound of a fierce battle came from that direction. Boom. The two of them were shocked by the loud sound behind them and turned around. In the distant sky, 6 snow-blue rainbow dragons shuttled between the heaven and earth. A golden flowing light with extraordinary aura and a white flowing light were fighting with each other. That was not all. A black hurricane that was like a pillar that supported the heavens swept over to help. Countless towering trees were uprooted and swept up into the clouds. They really lured Wang Qing over. That black hurricane is... Deming Luan was shocked and said, "Could it be that King Wu Feng of the Black Mountain has come?" "I'm afraid so. Looks like Jintai wants to catch both father and son in one fell swoop, so he took the risk to lure them all over." Yu Qianzhou snorted disdainfully and sneered. Suddenly he saw many figures flying over in groups from the distant sky. It was obvious that they were not the subordinates of Jintai and Bai Qi, the two bandits. Countless figures flew into the sky from the forest in all directions. Their clothes were all strange and the color was mostly green. It was obvious that they were the plant spirits of the ancient forest. For a moment, angry shouts and the sound of fierce fighting mixed together. All kinds of flowing lights exploded in the sky like fireworks. "Let's take a look first. If it doesn't work, we'll return to the divine ruin realm and not play with them anymore. Go up." Yu Qianzhou shouted and took the lead to fly to the ancient language tree. Deming Luan immediately understood that it was a bit conspicuous to stand below. If they were not careful, they might be affected, so he also flashed up. The two of them hid in the dense golden leaves and watched the battle outside through the gaps. Seeing that the incomparably powerful hurricane had joined in, the two flowing lights, one gold and one white, immediately broke away from the battle with the 6 snow-blue rainbow dragons. They streaked across the sky at an unbelievable speed and escaped. "Jintai, Bai Qi, the two of you have lured us father and son all the way here. If you have any schemes, then use them." A loud voice came from the black hurricane and resounded through the world. It seemed to have seen through Jintai and Bai Qi's scheme. However, the two of them were different from the previous times. They no longer ran and stopped but left without turning back. With the cultivation of everyone present, it would be very difficult to catch up to the two of them. Wu Feng and Wang Qing wanted to lead the large number of people gathered from the underworld and various sects to continue the chase, but they found that they were met with great resistance. Countless grass and wood monsters rushed over from all directions, doing their best to stop them from advancing any further. 6 snow-blue rainbow dragons immediately plunged into the densely packed grass elves and slaughtered them as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The whirring black hurricane easily swallowed up the people that swarmed over. This was a completely unbalanced battle, but the countless plant monsters still rushed over without any regard for their lives to die. For a moment, there were endless screams. Wu Feng and Wang Qing's father immediately felt that something was wrong. They hadn't met any resistance along the way. Why did they meet so many people who didn't want their lives here? Could this be Jintai and Bai Chi's scheme? Strange. Why are there so many plant monsters helping Jintai and Bai Chi without any regard for their lives? Deming Luan, who was hiding on the ancient language tree, was suspicious. He then sighed with some emotion and said, "Rushing over is just throwing away their lives, why bother?" Yu Qianzhou also felt that it was strange. He looked around and his gaze landed on the bronze tree trunk. After a moment of thought, he said with respect, "I understand. They are protecting the ancient language tree we are hiding in, and also the last barrier protecting their home." Chapter 11:23. The Great Bright Will didn't understand what he meant for the time being. It just couldn't bear to see countless grass and wood demons courageously dying. It shook its head gently and said, "The ancient forest has always been isolated from the outside world. It has never had any conflicts with the people outside. It can be said that it stands aloof from the world, but in the end, it can't avoid being implicated by the people outside." Wang Qing, who was wearing a silver mask and a wide blue robe, looked around. He was a little shocked when he saw the grass monsters coming from all directions to die. He faintly felt that they were not necessarily working for Jintai and Bai Chi. In a flash, he waved his sleeves, and the 6 rainbow dragons no longer slaughtered wantonly. They quickly converged around his body to defend himself. His eyes flickered, and a voice came from under the silver mask, "We are chasing after Jintai and Bai Chi. We have no enmity with you, so why are you trying to stop us?" Before anyone could answer, a cold snort came from the black whirlwind. "A group of reckless evildoers, those who stop me will die." The range of the whirlwind rapidly expanded, and for a moment, it seemed to have the power to devour the world. The storm-like attacks of the elves were like clay oxen in the sea, and had no effect at all. The violent howling of the black hurricane was like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. It covered the sky and the earth, and the powerful suction it produced quickly spread out, uprooting countless towering ancient trees. The ancient language tree that stood alone on the edge of the cliff stubbornly resisted the strong suction, and its golden leaves all flew toward the whirlwind. The strange thing was that every leaf was extremely firm, and even though it shook violently, not a single leaf fell off. Under the suction of the strong wind, the ancient language tree's gentle whisper turned into a sharp mournful cry, as if it was telling its vicissitudes of life and suffering, as if it was begging for mercy. The burning sea of fire in the distance was rapidly expanding with the help of the wind. The elves had no time to put out the fire, and they all rushed to block the attack of the strong enemy. Seeing the sea of fire gradually expanding in the ancient forest, the mournful cries soared into the sky, and they didn't know why this disaster suddenly befell them. The billowing smoke was sucked in by the whirlwind, blowing past the ancient language tree. The 2 people hiding in the canopy were almost smoked. Deming Luan clenched his fist in front of his nose and said, "Let's go. If this goes on, I'm afraid that even the 2 of us will be implicated." Yu Qianzhou, who was hugging the tree branch tightly in the strong wind, chuckled and said, "There's no rush. There was no hurry. Wait a little longer. If I'm not wrong, there's going to be a good show soon. I guarantee that you'll be able to broaden your horizons. You can't miss this opportunity, hee. Is there a good show to watch?" Deming Luan looked left and right, seeing the strong hurricane approaching. He suddenly frowned and his eyes lit up. "You mean the one from Wood Killing Sea?" In Wood Monster Sea, under the hollow tree, Lure sat on a tree root. She hugged her legs and rested her chin on her hands, not saying a word. The tears on her pretty face had yet to dry. Mu Yuanzi, who was leaning on his staff, looked down at her from above. This time he didn't blame her. He thought that a child's heart was broken, and that a little sadness would pass. Suddenly, a shrill wail came from a distant mountain. The grandfather and granddaughter pair looked back at the same time, and Mu Yuanzi's expression changed abruptly. He teleported high into the sky, and his eyes shone with a green splendor to see into the distance. He saw the branches and leaves of the ancient language tree on the distant mountain, as if it would be uprooted by a gust of wind at any time. Mu Yuanzi's angry snort resounded in the air. He pointed his finger at the void, and the profound wave-light wall appeared. Fierce winds swept in and thick black smoke surged in. Mu Yuanzi smelled the sparks in the black smoke and he immediately became furious. He stepped into the profound wave-light wall and disappeared. The murderous hurricane was getting closer and closer, and Yu Qianqiu, who was hugging the tree branch tightly, felt a little overwhelmed. He was annoyed that he was going to miss a good show. Just as he was about to leave with Deming Luan, he heard an angry shout from the sky, "Who dares to behave atrociously in my ancient forest?" Facing Deming Luan's questioning gaze, Yu Qianqiu's eyes brightened, and he nodded repeatedly, thinking that it was finally here. What arrogance! The immortal netherworld and immortal netherworld are the world of us father and son, and even the ancient forest has to submit. A cold sneer came from the black hurricane, and he seemed to realize that the newcomer's cultivation was profound. His tone changed and he asked, "Who are you?" The wood spirits that had been rushing over from all directions saw Mu Yuanzi's figure suddenly appear in the sky, and their grief and indignation turned into joy. They quickly retreated, no longer making unnecessary sacrifices. At this time, whether it was in the sky or on the ground, all the wood spirits knelt and kowtowed to Mu Yuanzi. Mu Yuanzi waved his hand at the crowd with a grave expression and said, "All of you go put out the fire." The hidden meaning behind his words was, "Leave this place to me." All the wood spirits immediately obeyed, and rushed to the blazing sea of fire to put out the fire. Wang Qing, who was protected by 6 rainbow dragons, looked at the old man with the walking stick in the sky, and his gaze gradually became serious. The moment he came out, he saw the black hurricane kill countless people. Mu Yuanzi, who did not like to kill, was also angry. Without saying anything, the wooden staff in his hand turned into a stream of light, and shot up into the sky. In the blink of an eye, a huge wave was set off in the sky, and a pillar that supported the heavens directly smashed towards the center of the black hurricane like a meteor. Jin Tai and Bai Qi, who were hiding in the distance, suddenly saw a terrifyingly huge wooden staff appear in the sky. Bai Qi's pupils suddenly shrank, while Jin Tai laughed loudly and clapped his hands saying, "Wonderful, wonderful! We finally summoned old Mu. Bai Qi, let's go help old Mu." The two of them immediately turned into streams of light and quickly returned. With a loud bang, the heaven and earth shook. The huge wooden staff pierced into the black hurricane, and directly scattered the fierce hurricane. With one move, it broke the fierce hurricane that no one could block. Wu Feng, who was hiding inside, vomited a mouthful of blood on the spot, and was sent flying 1,000 meters away. After breaking through the hurricane, the huge staff stabbed into the ground with a boom, and the ground immediately split into pieces, creating deep ravines. The brown wooden staff that stood between the heaven and earth was simple and unadorned, but it was majestic and awe-inspiring. Mu Yuanzi was standing on the head of the high staff, looking down disdainfully. Wang Qing, whose blue robes fluttered in the wind, was shocked. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and he raised his head to look at the person standing on the head of the staff. He did not expect the other party to break the wind god's staff with one move, and heavily injure his father. He immediately activated the sword art, and with a flick of his sleeve, the 6 rainbow dragons immediately roared and attacked. Mu Yuanzi, who was about to be besieged by the 6 dragons, stood there indifferently. Azure light suddenly erupted from the head of the staff beneath his feet. 6 thick ancient vines shot out from the head of the staff in the blink of an eye, wrapping themselves around the necks of the 6 rainbow dragons with lightning speed. No matter how much the 6 dragons struggled, they were unable to break free. It was a spectacular scene of dragons being tied up in the sky. Without the interference of the hurricane, Deming Luan and Yu Qianqiu, who were hiding in the canopy of the ancient language tree, saw the battle clearly. The two of them looked at each other, unable to conceal the shock in their eyes. Although the two of them knew that Mu Yuanzi was definitely very powerful, they did not expect that he would be able to suppress Wang Qing and Wu Feng with just one move. Yu Qianqiu had originally wanted to ask Bai Changchun to help him deal with Mu Yuanzi so that he could devour him, but after seeing this scene he immediately dispelled that thought. Jin Tai, who was holding the golden cloud rod, and Bai Qi, who was controlling the obsidian light mirror, appeared at the same time. Together with Mu Yuanzi, they trapped Wang Qing in the center. Bai Qi was solemnly examining Mu Yuanzi, but Jin Tai looked at Wang Qing and laughed wildly. Wang Qing. You probably didn't even dream that this day would come. Today I'm going to make you and your father spit out everything you've eaten, including interest. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.